In May 2024, Google told millions of people searching for cooking advice to put non-toxic glue in their pizza sauce. Not a meme, not satire, a real AI-generated answer presented as absolute fact. It might seem like a funny glitch, it's not. It's something worse. It's the fatal symptom of a dead internet. Right now, almost 50% of web traffic is bots. Google has quietly gone from a search engine into a closed-loop echo chamber where AI trains on AI. The internet you grew up with is gone. You're no longer the consumer. You are the training data. This is why you need to stop using Google right now. The pizza query had started off as something innocent. Why does my cheese keep sliding off pizza? And it didn't take long for the internet to find the source. It had been scraped from an 11-year-old Reddit troll post that had somehow been pulled off of the top of Google's metrics. And then the floodgates opened. It didn't take long for people to start experimenting with searches to see what other glitches were out there. And one posed a bigger risk to public health. Someone Googled, "How many rocks shall I eat?" and got back a result claiming that geologists at UC Berkeley suggested eating at least one small rock a day. It cited a geologist named Dr. Joseph Granger, who described how to incorporate pebbles into your daily diet. The source for this? A 2021 article from the satirical website The Onion. It was clear that the Google algorithm was anything but okay. For one thing, these aren't Google search results. Those still exist, but you have to look for them. They're hidden below a summary of results that Google's AI-powered algorithm thinks are the most suitable responses. There's just one problem. They're often anything but. These are two of the most bizarre results, but users have reported strange responses pulled from bizarre corners of the internet by the algorithm. This has led to many saying that it makes Google much harder to use, because the AI isn't just wrong, it is hallucinating. Ever since AI burst onto the scene in the early 2020s, companies have rushed to automate, and that decision has backfired. A 2024 report showed that over 50% of the traffic on the internet is now AI, and automated bots generating, scraping, and interacting with content at a massive scale. That means for every real person online, like you, there is a machine seeing the exact same thing. Not to understand it, but to game it. That creates a paradox. Platforms like Google are designed to filter the content on the internet into useful search results. But now that content is heavily designed by bots, which is then analyzed by bots and then filtered out to humans. But the scary thing is, this isn't an accident. Google set it all in motion in March 2024, and no one noticed. Like all major tech websites, Google periodically updates their software and hardware to refine the user experience. But no one was prepared for how significant the March 2024 one would be. Google was promising a better experience, one that would deprioritize low-quality content and make it easier to find what you were looking for. The priority points that the algorithm shift was supposed to target expired domains, mass-generated pages, and third-party sites built to just boost other websites and search results. These were tactics that spammers were using to manipulate Google for years. The move was meant to clean up an internet already built around the algorithm. It did not go to plan. Overnight, the tactics that sites had been using to promote themselves became worse than useless. They became actively harmful. Years of high rankings were lost in a second, and sites found themselves having to start all over. While many of them were using methods that Google was now deprioritizing, others reported their organic self-promotion was getting them unfairly flagged as spamming. Across the board, the impact was devastating. Studies tracking independent niche sites found that over 80% of them lost their traffic between December 2023 and August 2024. This hit human-tested review sites like HouseFresh with a sledgehammer, which reported losing 91% of its own Google traffic. For many small sites, this was the digital equivalent of Walmart coming to town and putting a massive billboard right in front of the local hardware store's facade. The original store is still there, but no one will ever find it. But the move didn't even do what Google wanted. Humans think fast, but computers think faster. By the time the update had landed, top marketing firms had already pivoted to what's known as parasite SEO. Most of the sites that lost their views from the Google update were small, independent sites that built their own domain strength over the years. By contrast, parasite SEO piggybacks off of trusted platforms like Medium, LinkedIn, and Reddit to rank higher without actually working for it. And Google doesn't always differentiate between good and bad content. All that matters is ranking. So companies started flooding these platforms with as much content as possible, and if you're thinking that meant big payouts for writers, think again. This was one of the first places where AI-generated writing found a foothold. Major corporations began spamming the sites with boilerplate text that could be generated in minutes. It didn't need to be good, it didn't need to be original, it just needed to be published in the right place. The bots were gaining in more ways than one. One of the biggest problems facing websites today is what's known as the search heist. Bot networks target expired domain names they deem to be high value and high authority. They take over the driver's seat and pump it full of as many AI-generated articles as they can, sending it catapulting up the rankings. These domains are often built around the buyer's main rival, using slight variations on their name and then filling it with content favoring the competition. It might not sound ethical, and many wonder if it's even legal, but it works. And we have the evidence from the guy who did it the best. In 2023, AI-generated content was still in its early stages, but SEO experts were amongst the earliest adopters. One of them, Jake Ward, wanted to see just how far he could push it. The results were staggering. He used AI to export a competitor's sitemap and then turned each of their URLs into separate article titles. He put AI to work crafting 1,800 articles based on each of those titles and then uploaded them. It's an old tactic and one that usually takes a lot of manual data scraping, but now it's instantaneous and more successful than ever. The public didn't find out about this domain heist from a competitor's lawsuit. They found out about it from Ward, as he proudly boasted about it on X. He even gave other users a blueprint for how to exploit empty domains and turn them into an asset. Over 18 months, Ward was successfully able to poach 3.6 million organic search hits from his competitor, with a peak of 490,000 hits in 1 month. He showed how to automate the vast majority of the process, allowing people to strike while the iron was hot. For many companies, the opportunities are everywhere. The primary tactic for this is to target low-quality dormant pages that receive little traffic, also known as zombie pages. When they lapse, they're bought up and used to redirect traffic away from the parent company, straight to their competitor. There doesn't even need to be a person directing the effort. Bot networks are instructed to watch for open domains, snatch them up, and start cranking out content while the CEO is still having his morning coffee. More and more websites wind up being taken over by AI-generated content, which has many people asking, is anyone home anymore? It seems like a simple problem to fix. Most AI-generated content, even today, is still riddled with errors, and it's fairly easy to detect. Despite this, Google hasn't followed it up with anything on the scale of its March 2024 purge to reverse the damage it's caused. It's not down to lack of resources either. The system might be working exactly as it was intended to. Google isn't falling down on the job, it is trapping you in a loop of AI-generated content. And it's all for one specific reason. In the past, you would type in a word or a question into a search engine and then immediately get a list of links to choose from. It would be arranged by the algorithm, starting with what it thinks is the most useful. It was simple, practical, and it offered users a list of options until they found the right one. That is how Google started. But there is just one problem. It is useful, but it's not profitable. Google isn't a humble little search engine startup that it began as. It is a behemoth with one priority: make money. It wasn't long before Google search was infiltrated by advertising, which then meant users had to look closely to make sure whether the top result they were clicking on was an organic search result or a promoted item. By now, the clicks may be pointless. Now, you might think a search engine has one job: to get you to the right place. But what if the right place never actually leaves the search engine? The zero-click result has become the ideal for search engines, providing traffic to them and no one else. This is when the user gets all the data they've been looking for on the first page that they land on. There's no need to click any of the other links. This has evolved several times over the years, first with rich snippets which provide a short text blurb from each website link, and then a knowledge panel that provides a visual text and analysis of certain topics pulled from the search interface, often in partnership with sites like Wikipedia. It was typically informative and it kept traffic on Google. Then AI changed everything. Now, the first thing you see isn't your search result at all. It is a Google AI summary that pulls from assorted top sources to create a paragraph or two with written text, links, and data. And it sounds useful, but there is one big question: where is this information coming from? And can it be trusted? According to a recent study by SparkToro, 58.5% of Google search traffic is now zero-click. People get all the information they need from the landing page without ever clicking a link. Anecdotal reports from teachers talk about Gen Z and Gen Alpha students raised on Google who just use the landing page as an all-purpose question and answer device. They don't know how to find web pages on their own, and that might be exactly what Google wants, to become a landing page not just for searches, but for everything. But people are noticing, and they're finding an unusual refuge. Most of the beneficiaries of the changes in Google have been AI-generated sites and Google itself, but there has been one big exception: Reddit. The site has always been an unusual one. Separate from the boom in social media, only the front page is driven by algorithms. It's primarily text-based rather than video, and AI is limited to only a few summaries. And that led to an unexpected explosion. Reddit saw its organic Google traffic increase by raw numbers more than any other site, jumping from around 132 million to over 500 million in only a year. The reason for it is simple. Reddit is one of the few places on the internet where people still assume they're talking to other human beings. The combination of ease of posting with general anonymity means that people are more willing to post openly there. Google quickly saw that Reddit was becoming a goldmine for organic content, and it didn't wait long to make a deal. In February 2024, Google offered $60 million for Reddit's data. This lets Google use Reddit posts to train its AI models and even influence search results. It's something that likely came at a high price, showing just how valuable Reddit has become. That same year, Reddit posted its first ever quarterly profit as a public company, largely driven by a surge in search traffic. But this might turn out to be a double-edged sword. Reddit users have been noticing an unusual surge in repetitive stories, all dealing with the same conflicts and featuring a similar writing style. Users are quick to call out what they suspect to be AI-generated stories and then downvote the posts. But it is clear this may be an uphill battle. Reddit's data is now valuable, which means the same bot networks that made it such a convenient place to search now see it as a convenient place to exploit. Google thinks it can solve its problems by tapping into Reddit's data, but the internet may be too far gone for that, whether the users want it or not. On Google alone, there has been a recent backlash over the fact that AI isn't just on the search engine, it is in the email servers. Users get AI-packaged summaries of their emails, and they even find the system prompting them with likely next lines as they write. Many have complained that the option to turn these features off is hard to find and use, and that may be leading to a much bigger problem. AI skeptics have long warned of a potential crisis called model collapse. This is something observed in AI training models, where machine learning eventually winds up training on itself. Because it processes so much data, it absorbs large amounts of uncurated synthetic information. Those flawed inputs then find their way into search results, and the errors start compounding inside of the system. In early model collapse, minority data that doesn't match the majority gets filtered out, making it harder to get more specific information. That is the beginning of the end. Late-stage model collapse is what happens when a large language model starts to lose its usefulness. It begins repeating flawed information, it becomes harder to correct, and its performance steadily degrades. Some researchers compare it to inbreeding, where a genetic defect gets passed down again and again, resulting in a more pronounced and often harmful version of the trait. In simpler terms, the AI starts feeding on its own worst data, and it slowly breaks down, and Google might be ground zero. Google isn't just the largest search engine in the world. Its only close competitor is itself. Google itself has around 90% of global search engine traffic. Its only real competitor for query volume is YouTube, which Google also owns. Amazon and Yahoo are above 1% of total traffic. The sheer volume of queries that Google undertakes each day means it's processing levels of data that no one else can compete with, and that data is increasingly composed of AI-generated content. The errors that caused the bizarre glue and rock answers in 2024 haven't been resolved, they're only getting worse. And it could be bringing us toward a terrifying singularity. As more and more AI-generated content enters the fray by the day, it becomes increasingly difficult for any human-generated content to make an impact. The genuine sites slide further down the page, the AI-generated content becomes more prominent, and the errors get amplified, until the main search engine results are all synthetic content designed to promote itself. The AI trains on more AI, and people aren't getting what they want out of Google anymore, they're getting what Google wants them to get. And in this case, what becomes of all human knowledge? European law enforcement group Europol sounded an alarm, and it's not so much an early alert as a last-ditch warning. They say that about as much as 90% of online content could be AI-generated by the end of 2026. That might seem alarmist and ridiculous, but there is a cavalcade of AI-generated content on just about every social media site, often designed to inflame or spark arguments. And on millions of ghost websites across the internet, AI articles are generated daily without the intention of having anyone read them. They don't need eyeballs directly on them because Google is already watching. And that's why some people are starting to think ahead. A small group of dedicated online veterans are starting to pivot to new sites that eschew AI, albeit with mixed results. Over the last few years, new search engines have popped up, with Kagi and Marginalia being the two most prominent. Both pride themselves on being human-only search engines prioritizing non-commercial content and organic searches, with an optional AI-powered algorithm. Similarly, in the video game world, a small but dedicated fanbase has emerged for retro consoles where users can play older games they might have grown up with. For most people, they're standing at a fork in the road. There are two possible paths forward for the internet, one much harder than the other. On one side, there's an internet by humans for humans, led by a conscious human reality. But this path features a lot of challenges along the way. For one thing, it'll take designers to build these new websites, and designing new sites does not come cheap. So most of these initiatives will either have to rely on donations or ask people to pay subscription fees, which isn't always an easy sell, especially when the other option is free. There's an old saying, if something is free, you are the product. And that's never been more true than with Google. They're becoming the center of a new internet, one that is increasingly AI-generated and shaped by algorithms built on your data. And as Google embeds itself deeper into more sites and pushes its Gemini AI across the entire ecosystem, its reach becomes harder to avoid. Unless users start questioning what they're being shown, step away from it, and begin creating something new. You probably think ChatGPT is a magical, free assistant getting smarter every single day to benefit humanity. It's not. It's actually getting worse. OpenAI is burning through billions of dollars, and their brilliant survival plan involves downgrading free users, locking the real model behind a $200 paywall, and turning your conversations into ad space. So if it's felt off lately, it's probably not in your head. They hope most people wouldn't notice the shift, and that's the point. But that free AI assistant, it's already dead. Chapter 1: The $5 billion Dumpster Fire. OpenAI is in trouble. Documents show the company missed nearly every internal target it set for itself this year. Revenue goals? Missed. Weekly active user benchmarks? Missed. Even the IPO timeline, once framed as a victory lap, now looks more like a high-pressure sprint with no clear finish line. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal in April 2026, the numbers paint a far less polished picture than the public narrative suggests. A $5 billion loss against $3.7 billion in revenue for 2024. The math doesn't lie. They earned $3.7 billion, and they lost $5 billion. For every dollar the company brings in, it spends $2.35. The Wall Street Journal also indicates CFO Sarah Fryer has flagged serious concerns about funding the next wave of multi-billion-dollar data center commitments, especially if growth even only slightly wobbles. But according to OpenAI, it's all part of the scaling toward AGI. And despite the red flags, Wall Street is still largely on board. $5 billion in losses works out to roughly $13.7 million per day. Spread out across an entire year, that's about $9,500 every minute. Blink and roughly $160 is gone. Executives aren't volunteering their stock options. Venture capitalists who've already poured in tens of billions aren't eager for another top-up round. Microsoft has even started asking pointed questions on earnings calls, which leaves one increasingly exposed group: you. Chapter 2: Lobotomizing the free tier. ChatGPT was never free. It was subsidized heavily and deliberately by one of the biggest funding machines in tech. The backers behind it reads like a who's who of late-stage venture capital: Microsoft, SoftBank, Thrive Capital, plus Saudi sovereign funds. Combined investment reportedly exceeds $60 billion, and at the current burn rates, that doesn't last decades, it lasts years. Eventually, someone has to decide what refilling the tank actually costs. The panic is real, the IPO clock is ticking, and the survival plan that they've cooked up is desperate. It was to make ChatGPT seem the same, while quietly changing what powers it. Essentially, it became dumber. There's a mechanism that users don't really see called capacity-based fallback. During peak hours or after invisible daily quotas, users get silently rerouted from the flagship model to cheaper mini variants. The handoff is invisible, the quality drop is not. After roughly 10 messages every 5 hours on the strong model, your conversation collapses mid-sentence into generic autocomplete mode. User telemetry, internal strategy notes, and a parade of Reddit threads all confirm the same thing. Routing queries to smaller models is a deliberate cost control lever. Your AI assistant has been intentionally swapped for a budget version while you stare at a familiar brand name and assume nothing has changed. The savings are huge. Routing queries to smaller models can cost a fraction of a cent versus several cents on a flagship. Multiply that across 800 million weekly active users, and the math starts to make sense. For you, it boils down to paying full attention to a conversation partner who suddenly forgets your last 3 messages and starts answering in fortune cookie aphorisms. Performance gaps are not subtle. Independent testing suggests fallback models struggle with tasks the flagship handles in a single step. Multi-step reasoning breaks down. Code generation starts introducing subtle, hard-to-spot bugs. Long context summarization begins dropping key details. One day, your assistant solves a calculus problem, and the next day, after lunchtime traffic kicks in, it can't count the syllables in a haiku. So this doesn't look random, it looks designed. A free tier that felt like a miracle was in reality a loss leader, and it was propped up by marketing capital and long-term bets that were never meant to last forever. The next shift is already priced in, and it isn't subtle. Chapter 3. The Elite Paywall. Internal pricing memos confirm OpenAI's $20 per month plus tier, once the crown jewel of consumer AI, has been quietly demoted to neglected middle child. Plus subscribers still get something usable, but the frontier intelligence, that is behind a velvet rope. Meet ChatGPT Pro, $200 a month. It has unlimited access to O1 and O1 Pro mode, higher rate limits than Plus, and priority compute when servers are under load. There are also lower error rates on harder reasoning tasks compared to standard tiers. The takeaway is simple: the smarter model now sits behind a paywall. The math gets uncomfortable the longer you stare at it. $200 a month is $2,400 a year per user. A family of 4 wanting access to the same smart tier, that's $9,600 annually. That is more than many households spend on groceries in several months. Reported uptake of the $200 tier sits in the lower single digits of total users, roughly 5 million subscribers worldwide. That's about 0.06%. And meanwhile, frustration from Plus users is building. The strategy is becoming harder to miss, and it's about to reach into places you probably never expected. Chapter 4. Your Chats, brought to you by Carl's Jr. The next version of ChatGPT isn't just smarter or more expensive, it's monetized in a new way. Ads are coming to your AI assistant. And that is not rumor or speculation, it's in OpenAI's own announcement. Advertising is now an official product line, starting with the free tier and a new $8 ChatGPT Go plan rolling out in US beta. Advertisers reportedly face minimum commitments north of $200,000 just to get in the door. Early pricing was high, around $60 per 1,000 views, before being lowered to actually attract buyers. Ads will appear at the bottom of responses and be clearly labeled, for now, because the same company once told a podcast audience that ads in ChatGPT would be a last resort. But apparently that last resort has arrived early. That last resort got a launch plan. The mechanics here are simple and deliberate. Free users see ads. $8 users see fewer or differently formatted ads. $20 users are spared, for now, and $200 users, no ads at all. Same product, different rules. The more you pay, the cleaner and more capable it gets. The real play isn't just ads, it's targeting. Type wedding and you'll be swamped by venues, rings, and honeymoon packages for the next 6 months, because unlike social media, people tell this thing everything. Industry analysts estimate conversational targeting can massively outperform traditional ads, sometimes by multiples, for one simple reason. Nobody tells Instagram their problems, but they tell ChatGPT. Reported figures suggest the ad business is being modeled to generate over $25 billion in annual revenue by 2029. That is a number that would on its own exceed OpenAI's entire current revenue. They have access to your medical questions, relationship doubts, tax confusion, and 3 a.m. searches. That's a marketer's dream wrapped up in a friendly chat bubble. The reason any of this is actually happening comes down to one rival quietly devouring the only segment of the market that actually prints money. Chapter 5. The Anthropic Panic. Industry reporting shows something most people won't see in a headline. Rival firm Anthropic is now generating roughly the same level of annual revenue as OpenAI. Some estimates even put it ahead. The smaller company, the one Sam Altman's former colleagues founded, now generates more annualized revenue than the firm everyone calls the leader. What used to feel like a one-horse race is not anymore. The difference between these two firms is sharp, and it explains the panic. Anthropic runs more like a luxury boutique than a mass-market platform, serving just over 1,000 enterprise clients. Many of them pay in the 7 figures annually, some in the 8. Its flagship model, Claude, has become a major force in enterprise coding, and it's used by Fortune 500 engineering teams, Wall Street, and biotech research groups. These aren't customers sensitive to pricing. At $50 a seat, they don't blink, and that's because the productivity gains often pay for themselves before lunch on day one. OpenAI, meanwhile, is babysitting hundreds of millions of free-tier users. Anthropic extracts more from a single mid-sized enterprise contract than OpenAI does from 1 million casual ChatGPT users combined. Anthropic's niche market creates a very different kind of business. There are higher prices, longer contracts, and lower churn rates. The usage patterns are stable enough to actually forecast. Finance teams can model it. Compare that to OpenAI's consumer scale. It's a constant surge of unpredictable demand from hundreds of millions of users, a system where a small price change could trigger mass cancellations overnight. They are two very different machines. One is optimized for predictability, the other is built for scale and volatility. And in this market, it's not about branding, it's about what gets used. This is why the consumer product starts to look deliberately carved up. The free tier gets restricted to cut compute costs. The middle tier stops being the focus and becomes a funnel into the higher plans. The $200 Pro tier is aimed at users who treat it like a business infrastructure, not a subscription, and the ads are built for everyone who will never pay at that level. And every decision traces to closing the gap on Anthropic, hopefully before the investors start to ask uncomfortable questions about the story. Because if that gap doesn't close, the numbers won't either, and that pressure's starting to show. Chapter 6. The Safety Team Bails. Key members of the safety team, people tasked with preventing the system from behaving unpredictably or dangerously, have been leaving. Not quietly and not slowly, at a pace that should concern anyone treating this like a stable long-term bet. Jan Leike's resignation post is short and very public. His exact phrasing reads like a warning. Safety culture and processes have taken a backseat to shiny products. Leike was the co-lead of an alignment team, a man whose entire job was preventing the technology he was building from causing catastrophic harm. And he was telling everyone that the people who write his paychecks have stopped caring about the part where humanity does not get hurt. But Ilya Sutskever's exit was the warning shot. Sutskever was OpenAI's chief scientist and one of its original founders. He left, founded his own venture aimed squarely at safe superintelligence, and took a chunk of the technical brain trust with him. Leike's departure, which followed shortly after, confirmed the warning shot had not changed a thing. The super alignment team, created to ensure future more powerful AI systems remained under control, has been effectively dissolved. It was originally promised a significant share of internal compute resources, around 20%, to focus on safety research. That didn't last. Members have since left, the computing power has reportedly been redirected toward product development, and what was framed as a core mission now looks, from the outside, like something that's been sidelined. There's a consistent pattern across this exodus. Engineers who joined to build safe, aligned AGI now describe a very different reality. A company whose product decisions are driven by commercial teams, where safety reviews are sped up to meet launch deadlines, and where internal concerns about whistleblower protections reportedly surfaced during the same restructuring period that positioned OpenAI for a potential IPO. The guardrails are gone. The promises around transparency and caution start to feel harder to pin on any one group. What used to be handled by dedicated oversight is now handled by process under pressure. Former employees estimate that the number of people focused on alignment work has dropped sharply over the past 18 months. And the public-facing side of this company? It still moves fast. But some of the most impressive demos, the ones that made the headlines, are now more tightly controlled, delayed, or quietly pushed aside in favor of commercial priorities. And nothing was safe. Chapter 7. The Sora Bait and Switch. Sora went viral in 2024 for its hyper-real clips of things like woolly mammoths walking through snow and eerily realistic city scenes. But even it had a shelf life. In April 2026, it was no longer available as a standalone consumer product. What once looked like a public glimpse of the future has been pulled out of public hands. Internal communications cite excessive compute costs and a strategic pivot toward enterprise tools, agents, and robotics. It all comes down to economics. A single Sora video generation reportedly cost over 1,000 times more in compute than a typical text query. Multiply that by millions of curious users, and it becomes a problem. Hollywood studios, ad agencies, and enterprise media partners still get it at pricing that makes the economics work. But if you are just someone who saw a demo and thought you might like to make a birthday video for your niece, you don't. Industry reporting suggests studio licensing deals are in the $5 million to $20 million annual range depending on the partner. The consumer-facing version that once drove the hype now exists mostly as clips, demos, and memories. And it's not just Sora. Voice features that once felt unlimited are now throttled. Custom GPTs come with tighter limits, and advanced reasoning that was shown freely during hype cycles is increasingly reserved for higher-priced tiers. Over time, the pattern becomes hard to miss. Monetization, not as a side effect, but as the structure itself. It all leads toward one scheduled outcome, and that outcome already has a timeline attached. Chapter 8: The IPO Extraction Machine. Filings reveal OpenAI is restructuring its governance setup as it moves toward a potential public offering on a scale financial press has called unprecedented. The original structure, designed to limit investor profit and protect the mission, is being dismantled. The nonprofit board that once had real control over the company is being pushed to a more advisory role. On paper, the mission hasn't changed, it's still about safe AGI for humanity. But in reality, the system holding that mission in place is being rebuilt from the ground up. The trillion-dollar valuation target, repeated in every leaked memo, is the only number that matters. The data doesn't just disappear. Every prompt you've typed, every conversation you've had since 2022, it all feeds the system. And as this moves toward a public market story, that activity gets reframed. In an IPO document, it shows up as engagement or momentum. Strip away that language and it begins to look familiar. It's the same late-stage shift you see across tech platforms. The user stops being just the customer and starts becoming part of the product, not someone being served, something being used. And in the end, the uncomfortable realization, you were never the customer. Chapter 9: Welcome to the AI Underclass. So where does that leave you? The golden age of free, powerful, broadly available AI is over. It lasted about 24 months, and it's not coming back. Your daily digital workflow is about to get more expensive and more constrained. What used to feel like free access to intelligence is turning into a tiered system, where better capability sits behind higher prices. And the price for anything that actually works keeps going up. This is the pattern every tech wave hinted at but never made visible. Most people get the base version, and the base version doesn't get better first. It gets cheaper, simpler, and more limited. Access stops being equal, it all becomes allocated. Different people and different levels depending on what they can pay. A version of technology that was supposed to expand access is quietly splitting into tiers. Some people get full capability, most people get enough to stay inside of the system, and over time even that shifts. The promise was a tool that would lift everyone. Now the future of human intelligence is behind a subscription service, and we are being priced out. But inside the companies building this future, something else is happening. The people closest to the system are starting to leave, and it is sending serious shockwaves through Silicon Valley. You didn't buy that video game. You just paid for a temporary permission slip, and now Amazon is about to shred it. The world's largest retailer is effectively going to erase certain purchased games from thousands of user libraries on their Luna cloud gaming service. And while you think they can't legally take something away you paid full price for, Amazon's lawyers are currently arguing in federal court that the buy button that you just clicked was just marketing, not ownership. Chapter 1: The June 10th Eviction Notice. On June 10th, 2026, Amazon Luna users will wake up to an email that no gamer wants to see. The cloud gaming service that they've been using to manage a library they thought they owned is changing, and those changes will effectively make much of that library disappear. The service itself will still exist, but the part that made it feel like ownership, that's the part that won't. In early April 2026, Amazon Luna stopped selling individual games entirely through its platform. The storefront shut down, ending direct purchases overnight. That means anything users bought before that point is now on borrowed time, because when the June deadline arrives, access to those games is revoked forever. No library, no access, just gone. Gamers hit a button that said buy and handed over real money in each of those transactions, sometimes $60 to $70 per title. And Amazon's official position, stated plainly on its own support page, is that they're not entitled to a single cent back. Compare this to what happened when Google shut down Stadia. Google, a company not exactly known for its consumer generosity, issued full refunds for every game purchased on its now defunct cloud gaming service. Amazon looked at that precedent, they studied it, their legal teams reviewed it, and they made a different call. Their Luna service is killing something called Bring Your Own Library, a feature that lets users link their existing game libraries from GOG, EA, and Ubisoft to play through Amazon's cloud infrastructure. That goes dark on June 3rd, 1 week before the final third-party game purge. As for all that save data, the hundreds of hours of progress poured into those digital farms and worlds, Amazon will allow downloads for 90 days after June 10th. After that, in September, those files will be permanently deleted from Amazon servers. No extensions, no exceptions. Amazon support page notes that you should download your save data as soon as possible and test compatibility with your intended platform. Of course, they can't guarantee it'll work on other gaming services. Your money is gone, your games aren't staying where you bought them, and your progress may or may not transfer. Now, the company is suggesting you act quickly, while simultaneously acknowledging that there may be nothing worth acting quickly for. Luna will curate its own internal game library for the foreseeable future, and you can take it or leave it. For years, people have preached the pitfalls of sinking real money into cloud-based libraries, fearing what might happen if the floor beneath finally gives way. And now we are seeing one outcome in real time. It's the equivalent of a digital eviction notice, your belongings placed on the curb, and if you don't collect them in 90 days, Amazon will happily just throw them in the trash. Which begs the question, how is this even legal? Chapter 2. The Buy Button Lie. For all its problems, Luna, like Stadia before it, started off with its own appeal. For a certain kind of gamer, Luna was a pretty elegant solution. You paid for Prime anyway, the service was folded in as a perk, and if you wanted more, Luna Premium gave you a rotating catalog of AAA titles for $9.99 a month. When Amazon relaunched the service in October 2025, they rebranded it around a feature built with family party games in mind, with Snoop Dogg somehow involved in the marketing because, well, Snoop Dogg. The pitch was compelling for average families who didn't want to mess with hardware configurations, installs, or 3-hour day one patches eating up your afternoon. All you had to do was show up, click play, and game. It was easy. The service did have its fans, though not many. Like most cloud gaming platforms, it struggled with input lag and latency, device support was inconsistent, new games arrived slowly, and there was a lingering concern it wouldn't last, especially as it trailed behind Google Stadia in terms of reputation. But the ability to integrate third-party libraries gave it flexibility. There was also the ability to stream AAA games at 1080p and 60 frames per second, and it worked well when the conditions were right. And the ability to jump into Ubisoft titles without downloads, storage limits, or launcher headaches was a genuinely appealing concept. After the latest announcement, Luna's few faithful fans were already changing their tune. "Well, everything I play on Luna are paid titles," said one dejectedly. "I guess I'm done with Luna." Amazon's response was a corporate classic. They offered a complimentary Luna Premium subscription in return, which, of course, locked users into the Luna ecosystem. It did absolutely nothing for the third-party games they'd paid for and were already playing. Which brings us back to the legal architecture that makes that type of response not only possible but protected by law. Because if there is one word Amazon doesn't want you to use right now, it is own. In August 2025, a class action lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington. The plaintiff was a Californian named Lisa Reingold. Her charge was that Amazon ran what she called a bait and switch. They were displaying a buy movie button while burying the reality of what consumers were actually purchasing in deep legalese at the bottom of the confirmation screen. That fine print, according to the complaint, granted consumers a non-exclusive, non-transferable, non-sub-licensable, limited license to access content, maintained entirely at Amazon's sole discretion. It was revocable at any time, without warning. Reingold was furious that Bella and the Bulldogs Volume 4, purchased for $20.79 on Amazon Prime Video, had vanished from her library. Now Bella and the Bulldogs may not be your particular vice, but no judgment if it is. But for the Downton Abbey crowd, the people who paid good money between 2010 and 2014 to own a piece of British aristocratic misery, your library had also lost that series by 2024. The same principle is played out over and over again without people even realizing it. The filing describes the gap between what Amazon advertises and what it actually sells with a precision that is damning. At no point prior to the purchase is the consumer ever put on notice, in plain language, that he or she is buying just a license that can be revoked at any time. This is not Amazon's first rodeo defending this argument in court. In 2021, a similar class action alleged that Amazon had deceived consumers by misrepresenting that it was selling digital content when it was in fact licensing it. The company's defense was remarkable. Amazon argued that the word buy doesn't imply perpetual ownership. Quoting directly from Webster's dictionary, their lawyers maintained that it simply means rights to use our services upon payment. Plaintiffs pushed back that a reasonable consumer understands that when they click buy, they own it, unless or until they return it or otherwise dispose of the good. They then added that what they received was a limited license Amazon could revoke at any time for any reason. The court declined to dismiss the case outright, ruling that it was plausible that the word buy could be materially misleading to a reasonable customer. Amazon walked away from that ruling and kept the button exactly where it was. Then California changed the rules of the game. Assembly Bill 2426 took effect on January 1, 2025. It is, in legal terms, the equivalent of forcing snake oil salesmen to print "This is not medicine" on the bottle in 40-point font, prominent enough that no reasonable person could possibly miss it. The law prohibits companies from marketing digital transactions as a purchase or using words like buy, unless one of two things is true. Either the customer receives unrestricted ownership, or they clearly acknowledge that what they're getting is a revocable license. Amazon does neither. The lawsuit also points to a specific scenario that reads like a thought experiment, but it is completely real. Let's say you paid $40 for both Barbie and Oppenheimer on Amazon. Barbenheimer double feature, the cultural event of 2023. One morning you wake up, Amazon loses a licensing agreement, and your Barbenheimer weekend is simply gone. The court, in its own words, acknowledged that a consumer in that situation might feel a little miffed or go nuclear. The court used the word nuclear in a legal filing about a streaming license. That is how absurd this has become. Amazon is betting on the fact that you didn't read page 11 of their terms of service, betting on the fact that you don't have a lawyer. And for years, they were right. Chapter 3. The Trillion-Dollar Retreat. To understand why Amazon is doing this, we should explain who Amazon even is when it comes to gaming. The gaming industry is worth $187 billion, and in 2012, Amazon decided they wanted a slice. They bought Twitch in 2014 for nearly $1 billion. Pretty smart move. They announced 3 big AAA games in 2016. Pretty ambitious. And then one of them, Breakaway, got canceled in 2018. Then another called Crucible launched in 2020 after a 6-year development and an estimated $80 million investment. It was so catastrophically poorly received that Amazon didn't just shut it down, they unreleased it. It had been live for 41 days. You can get a free trial of a random meditation app that lasts longer than Amazon's $80 million flagship game. The Crucible team was redirected to another title in development called New World, which launched in 2021 to nearly 1 million concurrent players, and then immediately began hemorrhaging them as the bugs piled up. The in-game economy was broken by player exploits, so Amazon had to disable gold transfers entirely to stop the bleeding. A patch accidentally made one weapon so overpowered that they disabled it globally. A different patch duplicated gold. It also struggled to handle the number of concurrent players on launch day, and it took 2 days to get their servers up to spec and bring down wait times. This is the company that runs the cloud infrastructure for a significant portion of the entire internet. By October 2025, the butcher's bill came due. Amazon cut 14,000 jobs company-wide. Gaming absorbed a disproportionate share. Studios were shuttered. Their Lord of the Rings MMO was announced in 2019, canceled in 2021, revived in 2023, and then quietly stopped being discussed. And Amazon Luna, the platform meant to tie it all together, retreated to the lowest risk option, a curated subscription library. There were no more individual purchases, no third-party storefronts, just a controlled catalog. Yes, Luna is evolving. Amazon will happily take your $9.99 a month for Luna Premium. You just won't be able to buy anything, link anything, or own anything anymore. You'll get whatever games Amazon decides to put into the catalog for however long they decide to keep them there. Amazon thinks that this is better serving the players. But players are smarter than that. After a decade and billions spent failing in gaming, Amazon rebuilt Amazon Luna into something with zero liability, zero ownership, and zero risk for them. The risk, as usual, has been neatly transferred to you. Chapter 4: The Walled Garden Trap. For a lot of Luna users, the solution to access your games through the third-party storefront is completely useless. Luna's entire pitch, the reason people choose it over a PlayStation or a gaming PC, was that you didn't need the hardware. An internet connection and a screen you already owned was good enough, and that was the point. So when Amazon says, "Don't worry, you can still play your games through the EA app," what they're really saying is, go buy a gaming PC. Would you be happy if your bus company canceled your commute route and then just politely suggested you drive yourself to work? The save data situation makes it even more personal. Every hour you sank into a game on Luna, every completed quest, every unlocked skin, every painstakingly leveled character lives on Amazon servers. After June 10th, you have 90 days to download it. Amazon's support page even warns you about compatibility issues. The downloads might not work anywhere else. Your progress might just have been a souvenir. This is the walled garden in its purest form. A closed platform ecosystem designed to be convenient enough to pull you in and just inconvenient enough to keep you from leaving. Cloud saves that don't port and purchases tied to a platform. The library was never really yours to begin with. Luna isn't even the first time Amazon's played this game. In February 2025, Amazon quietly removed the download and transfer via USB option from the Kindle platform. For years, that feature let Kindle readers download a local copy of their purchased ebooks directly to their computer. It could be used as a backup, a safety net, proof that the thing you bought existed somewhere other than Amazon servers. And that too was removed without ceremony and buried in a support page update most people never read until a few zealous individuals aggregated the news and helped it go viral. Amazon's official explanation was that it was a feature not many people used, and those who did were using it to commit ebook piracy, which is a remarkable framing, the assumption being that if you wanted a local copy of something that you paid for, you were probably a criminal. The backlash was significant enough that Amazon partially reversed course by early 2026. It announced it would allow ebook downloads as EPUB files, but only for titles where individual publishers explicitly opt out of DRM protection. Most major publishers won't, so the reversal is in practice for just a small fraction of the library. Then, just weeks before the Luna announcement, Amazon declared that 12 Kindle device models would lose the ability to purchase, download, or borrow new books entirely as of May 20th, 2026. The devices still work, they just can't access the store anymore. 2 products, 2 ecosystems, and the same pattern. Luna in this light is not an anomaly, it's a habit. Question now is whether anyone in a position of actual authority is gonna do something about it. Chapter 5: The Digital Bill of Rights. The good news is that something is shifting. Amazon's deceptive terms of service, licensing agreements, and a buy button that means nothing has enabled all of this, and that system is facing the most coordinated legal and legislative challenge it has ever seen. And it all started with a game called The Crew. In March 2024, Ubisoft shut down the servers for The Crew, a racing game released in 2014. The move rendered every purchased copy permanently unplayable. They could have patched it, released an offline mode, or a refund for those who purchased the game intent on playing the multiplayer. Instead, they reminded consumers that they had agreed to terms allowing exactly this. A YouTuber named Ross Scott, who runs a channel called Accursed Farms, decided that he had had enough. He launched a movement called Stop Killing Games, a consumer rights campaign demanding that publishers be legally required to plan for what happens to a game when they choose to abandon it. What they're not asking for is eternal server support or retro reactivation. A basic commitment to the players would be nice enough. If you sell someone a game, you must leave them a way to keep playing it after you walk away. What followed was a kind of grassroots momentum that corporate lawyers lose sleep over. The Stop Killing Games European Citizens Initiative, which they later renamed to Stop Destroying Video Games to avoid confusion, surpassed 1.29 million validated signatures. The number cleared the 1 million threshold required to force the European Commission to formally respond. On April 16, 2026, Ross Scott appeared before the European Parliament, where his team presented data on approximately 1,100 games that had become permanently inaccessible when official support ended. They cited Concord and The Crew. The hearing was by every account extraordinary. The European Parliament expressed support for the initiative. The European Commission's own representative was, in the words of one organizer, pretty positive. One consultant argued that games developed 20 years ago still technically function, the implication being that there was no technical reason consumers should be losing access to products they paid for, only a legal one. The momentum is now spilling beyond Brussels. Stop Killing Games has now launched NGOs in both the European Union and the United States. It's advising California lawmakers. It's in dialogue with the UK's Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Ross Scott, speaking on the state of the movement in early 2026, felt like winning wasn't out of the realm of possibility. By any meaningful measure, it is the largest organized consumer rebellion against digital licensing practices in internet history. Back in the United States, California's AB 2426, now in effect, is already the legal foundation for Lisa Reingold's lawsuit against Amazon. If that case survives, if it goes to trial and succeeds, it won't just affect Prime Video movie purchases. It'll set a precedent that reshapes how every digital storefront in America labels and markets its products. Amazon, for its part, is proceeding as planned. There is a special kind of corporate confidence on display here. It's the confidence of an entity that has read its own terms of service, confirmed that it says what it needs it to say, and has determined that the law, for now at least, agrees. The June 10th deadline is firm. They won't change that. The refund policy is firm. The save data window also firm. But Amazon's legal team may not have fully priced in the upcurrent in public sentiment. Once it crystallizes into legislation, that tends to move faster than corporate strategy. AB 2426 didn't exist 2 years ago, just like the Stop Killing Games EU petition didn't have 1 million signatures 2 years ago. Ross Scott wasn't standing in front of the European Parliament 2 years ago. The speed of this shift is the story. The precise moment where enough people understood what digital ownership actually means and decided they wouldn't take it anymore. And Amazon? As of April 2026, 14,000 jobs had been eliminated. Luna's purchase library had been wiped. Hundreds of millions of Prime subscribers lost Riot Games perks, and class action lawsuits were building in federal court. Yet, the official messaging stayed unchanged. These decisions are being made to better serve their players. If Amazon gets away with this, then every digital storefront on the planet has its answer. The buy button is safe to keep. The liability will never materialize, and the consumers, well, they'll keep absorbing the loss every time. Every save, every dollar you spent on a product you believed and owned, all of it now rests in the same legal foundation that Amazon is currently using to justify taking yours away. We were told to grieve the loss of our physical media shelves, our libraries of discs and cartridges, the things that truly belonged to us because we bought them irrevocably. Today, there's only a license and a trillion-dollar company in federal court arguing that you knew it all along. But loss of ownership isn't the only way the industry has been alienating its players. It's also happening in how games are being built, with decisions increasingly driven by efficiency over craft. It's 6 a.m., you wake up, apply for a job, and get rejected before your coffee's even ready. Not by a human, but by an algorithm that decided your future in seconds. You tweak your CV, rewrite your cover letter, hit send again, and again, and again. Hundreds of applications, hundreds of "we were impressed," followed by "unfortunately," and at first you blame yourself. Maybe you're not good enough. But what if the problem isn't you at all? What if the system is filtering you out before anyone ever sees your name? Because landing your first job isn't just hard, it is fundamentally broken. I'm Josh, and on today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're explaining how the entry-level job is dead. Millions of people are opening rejection after rejection and realizing the brutal truth. It's not about education, it's not about age or desired pay or location or culture. Instead, they've become victims of the experience paradox. Companies don't care about school, they want time, and they want 3 to 5 years of it. Therein lies the paradox. Entry-level, by definition, is not mid-level. It's a classic catch-22. They want someone experienced for an entry-level job, but they won't give you a chance to get that experience. So how are you supposed to get hired? This is becoming the norm in the Western world. The current data shows that in the US, around 60% of entry-level job offers in industries like IT, marketing, or finance all want years of experience, but they aren't willing to train anyone. As an unhappy job seeker wrote on Reddit, what happened to growing into your role? That's how economic mobility works. Without it, you'll get millions of young people stuck at the bottom of the corporate ladder with no way up. 20 years ago, economic mobility made sense. But 20 years is a long time, and a lot has changed. More than ever, hiring managers now think about risk when reading your applications, or more likely, when their AI systems read your applications. They're not thinking about training, they're predicting viability, how fast you can be doing something to enhance their bottom line. They're looking for a sweet spot. Too young, not enough experience means high risk. Too old, too much experience, and you're too expensive, too desperate, or too stubborn. As another person wrote on Reddit, you literally can't win. What companies are ideally looking for is young, experienced but not too experienced plug-and-play workers. As a recruitment specialist said in an interview, employees must now hit the ground running. In other words, the first rung of the employment ladder has been ripped away. It's currently smoldering on the bonfire of progress. And it's not just in the US. In the UK, StandoutCV.com looked at almost 49,000 advertisements comprising 43 popular entry-level jobs. 51.3% of those jobs wanted experience with an average of 2.7 years. How is that even possible when you're starting out? One of the only solutions is internships. These days, students sometimes find themselves interning for months at a time, even a year or more. They sometimes take on 2 or even 3 different positions. According to Forbes, when it comes to predicting how someone will perform in an entry-level job, education, references, and interviews were much less reliable than performance in an internship. The article said hiring managers are, quote, desperate to avoid lions on the CV and cats on the job. But who can actually afford to work for free? Not everyone is blessed with a safety net. Nonetheless, without an internship, you are stuck. Back in the 1980s, only 3% of Americans did internships. Today, it's closer to 50%. And if you do an internship, you're likely to get a job afterward, or at least that used to be the case. But what about the other 50%? Where do they fit in? That's why critics have been calling internships unethical and unfair. Privileged students with resources fare much better in the landscape of job hunting, and it's not always about intelligence, skills, or dedication. If you're enjoying this breakdown of why getting your first job is nearly impossible, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It won't fix the problem, but it helps the channel. So, with the bottom rung now taken away and internships now one of the only ways to jump up the ladder, some young people are being locked out of corporate careers. But the fact is, even with an internship, these days there's no hard guarantee that you'll land a job, because entry-level jobs are disappearing fast. For U.S. graduates aged 22 to 27, unemployment is now 5.7%, well above the overall 4.4% rate. And 40% of those graduates that are in work are doing jobs that don't even require a university degree. Right now, aspiring to a white-collar job is not a great idea. But it's going to get worse. The reality is, a lot of firms are currently in the process of removing most of their entry-level positions. Part of the problem is outsourcing. What's the point of hiring an entry-level American IT worker for between $36,000 and $66,000 a year when you could outsource the same work to someone in India or Vietnam, someone experienced who can hit the ground running? What would you do if you owned a business? In 2024, Forbes, writing about outsourcing in the US, said that 37% of small businesses outsource at least one IT process. It isn't going away. By 2029, global IT outsourcing is expected to grow by $812.7 billion. That same article said that right now, 66% of U.S. companies outsource at least one department. That means something like 300,000 American jobs are being outsourced every year. If the foreign worker can speak English well and has some very basic software, they're ready to go. Skilled, experienced, hardworking, low maintenance, helping to achieve 24-hour productivity. It's symbiotic perfection. They're hired through a third party. Usually they aren't even covered by U.S. employment law. They're employed under the vendor's local rules. But for young Americans who want to get in on the employment ladder, outsourcing means more competition. Globalization might work for owners and investors, but not always for the humble worker. Sure, it might mean you as a consumer receive goods and services at a lower price, but for many that's not a great trade-off. That said, for smaller businesses, outsourcing might be a matter of survival. Need a website, a logo, some video editing or digital marketing, and the global freelancer pool might very well work in your favor. Outsourcing can help companies get off the ground, and better off the ground than a non-starter because you might expand and hire more people. But does big tech need to outsource so much? The same big tech that has recently been issuing return to office or RTO orders to the aggrieved American staff. About 46% of corporate employees who received those orders said that they were going to quit. But it turned out that in surveys, 53% of the companies said they secretly hoped many of their staff would leave. What's known as quiet firing. Why? Well, they didn't need them, but they didn't want to go through the hassle of letting them go. Yet according to Gallup in 2023, at least 50% of the U.S. workforce was quiet quitting, meaning doing the bare minimum knowing they'd be fired. In the UK, Gallup said 90% of staff were not engaged with their jobs on the way to quiet quitting. But now many of the jobs don't even exist. They wanted to quit in a time of plenty, and those days are over. The companies hold all the cards. Either they can outsource your job, or they can hire someone who's willing to put in 24-hour shifts, never takes a day off, and very rarely makes a mistake. Artificial intelligence is the new golden child at the office. It's the main reason so many entry-level jobs are going or will go, not outsourcing. In 2024, 804 hiring managers at corporate firms were asked some questions about AI. 78% said their company expected to reduce hiring of recent graduates because of it. Some said there would just be small cuts, maybe only around 3 to 10% of the staff. Others saw carnage coming down the pipeline. Over a tenth said reductions could reach 15 to 30%. Some said as much as 30 to 60%. What would the office look like? And some of those managers went as far as saying they'd expect to lose 70% of their staff. Bear in mind, these were predictions, but layoffs are already happening. It's coming and it's going to get ugly. This is the cold reality. If you don't have strong critical thinking and problem-solving skills, you're competing with systems that can already do more and more of the entry-level work. The good news is only 7% of companies said they were offering fewer jobs than in the past. This was mostly because of AI, but also for financial reasons or because of a lack of faith in young graduates. Companies now expect a lot more of their young workers. Internships are becoming a thing of the past. 7 out of 10 companies said AI could do the job of an intern, so why bother with them? But as you know, internships used to be one of the ways to get on the corporate ladder. The World Economic Forum in March 2026 said over the previous 18 months, entry-level jobs in the U.S. had fallen by a staggering 35%, and that was mostly down to AI. Cheap, reliable, and obedient AI. And if Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei is right, 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs will be wiped out within the next few years. He warned that this will bring a labor market displacement and concentration of economic power. He thinks companies should reassign employees to stave off the need for layoffs. The cozy human-AI relationship in the workplace looks a lot more like humans being told to clean out their desks. The British Standards Institution in 2025 polled 850 company bosses in Australia, China, France, Germany, Japan, the UK, and the US. 41% said they'd already replaced staff with AI. 43% said they were planning to get rid of more humans in the year ahead. At the end of the day, it's all about productivity and efficiency. The long-term consequences of massive job displacement don't seem to concern the companies doing the displacing. Take Amazon, one of the biggest employers in the world, with around 350,000 corporate staff and a total global workforce of 1.5 million. The New York Times reported that just in the U.S., Amazon employs around 1.2 million people, but it plans to replace a lot of those jobs. The New York Times in 2025 reported that it had accessed internal documents that said the company plans to eliminate or avoid hiring for approximately 600,000 roles by 2033. AI is the reason. About 75% of Amazon's operations will be automated. It's already started in the office. Last year, the company laid off 30,000 of its office staff. That followed 27,000 corporate staff laid off in 2023. By 2027, Amazon's automation technologies will mean 160,000 staff in all kinds of roles not being hired. It estimates savings of around $12.6 billion. But that is tens of thousands or eventually hundreds of thousands of jobs down the drain of progress. And let's not forget Mark Zuckerberg, the man who only ever wanted to connect people with their loved ones. In 2025, he laid off 5% of his staff. By April 2026, he laid off hundreds more as his company tried to recoup losses after mistakenly assuming that people would want to spend all their time in the metaverse. It was a big bet, one that cost Meta an estimated $80 billion since 2021. The company has now turned to AI investment and firing staff. According to Reuters, Zucks might lay off 20% of the Meta workforce in total. He's also throwing $135 billion at AI with a focus on superintelligence, the kind of AI that will take away more entry-level jobs. The job-pocalypse is coming, whether you like it or not. Jack Dorsey knows. He recently told shareholders he plans to lay off 4,000 of his 10,000 staff. He said that everyone else in tech will do it, and he wants to be ahead of the curve. He's right. In the cutthroat world of business, if you lag behind, you go under. The so-called Big Four consultancy firms, Deloitte, EY, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and KPMG, have also jumped on the AI bandwagon. Collectively, they posted 44% fewer jobs for graduates in 2025 compared with 2023. PwC alone plans to cut U.S. entry-level hiring by nearly one-third by 2028. The firm axed 5,600 jobs in 2024, and more axing will follow. It's all happened so fast. In the olden days of 2021, PwC announced that in the next 5 years it planned to hire 100,000 new workers. Almost the exact opposite happened. That shows just how much things have changed in such a short time. With outsourcing and increasingly AI, entry-level jobs are becoming almost obsolete. The few people who do get hired will need to bring their absolute A game, all while young people are constantly told that they're not ready for the corporate world. But which jobs will go first? Recent estimates tell us 80% of all call center work for common customer service inquiries will be automated with chatbots by 2029. All of the jobs that went from the West to Asia in the last 20 years won't even exist over there either. If they do, they'll be few and far between as the call centers adopt the hybrid model where a human steps in when required. Who else is up for the AI guillotine? Clerical and administrative work will be gone. AI and robotic process automation, RPA, are already managing invoices, payroll, and basic bookkeeping. Humans will offer oversight, but they might work as AI verification specialists, but it's highly unlikely or nearly impossible that there will be just as many overseers as there were staff. Some of the pundits are currently saying that jobs will merely transform. For example, paralegals will just become much better when they have a robot assistant. This is the augmentation argument, and it says that we won't be replaced but will be given superpowers. The problem with this argument is it's based on a lot of, well, guesswork. A member of Anthropic's Economic Advisory Council said in an interview in The Atlantic that even the tech leaders don't know what'll happen. He kinda said that they were winging it. The same article said the same CEO in 2025 would openly talk about AI's effect on the job market. Now they've suddenly gone suspiciously quiet. Realists say companies do what's good for their revenue and their shareholders. What happens to the populace is an afterthought. To be sure, politicians may have tried to introduce policies to limit the carnage, but right now there's still no word about what those policies might look like. The one thing we do know is the entry-level jobs are already becoming the first to go. Whether it's engineering, basic coding, data entry, scheduling, basic architecture, SEO-type marketing, or writing basic blogs, a computer will do it. Routine, rule-based, digital, low risk. You should consider any of those jobs already gone. To survive, you'll need to not just have impressive cognitive skills and originality, but also AI literacy. One without the other won't work in this new demanding reality. But this still doesn't change the fact that you can't get your foot on the bottom rung of the ladder. And it's worse right now because Gen Z is having to scrap it out with all the millennials who recently lost their jobs. They too are going for the entry-level positions. During the years of the pandemic, e-commerce expanded, streaming surged, remote work tools advanced. In a nutshell, the digital world exploded as we all settled in for the new normal. It was the era of the Great Reset, where we would harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The problem is the future that was envisaged didn't arrive. As the metaverse flopped, growth slowed down and interest rates rose. Suddenly, big firms were wheeling their chopping blocks into the office. Growth turned into efficiency, cutbacks, apologies, and excuses. That left millennials out in the cold. Gen Z rose up in this storm of corporate chaos as millennials were told they were surplus to requirements. It should come as no surprise then that 43% of Gen Z workers are now participating in the gig economy. That's a rough estimate. It's the same with millennials. Depending on the source, either 38% or 45%, even up to 78% of millennials are now earning income from gigs. Some do it to supplement their income, some love the flexibility, but for many it is not a matter of choice. In 2024, the LA Times said 38% of all Americans had hustled in the gig economy, contributing to $1.27 trillion to the economy. This article suggested the government has a responsibility to make such work more sustainable, because right now it's not. There are very few protections for gig workers. So-called precarious work is becoming the norm. We're told that more people are at risk of exploitation. What's called the hustle culture doesn't usually come with safety nets. Workers can find themselves putting in 12-hour shifts, working multiple jobs just to get by. It's one of the reasons so many are moving abroad. Young people, even middle-aged people, are saying that if they have to hustle, they'll hustle where it works best for them. In 2025, according to the Digital Nomad forecast, 39% of Gen Z and millennials stated that they were going to work abroad in the next year. As a writer on the topic said, Gen Z is fast becoming the most internationally mobile generation in history. One of the countries which had been hit the hardest is the UK, a country where the media is talking about an exodus. The BBC cited the Office for National Statistics, or ONS, in 2025 when it said 195,000 people under the age of 35 had made the move abroad from the start of the year to June. In another survey, 75% of young Brits said they'd consider leaving. U.S. data shows the numbers have been increasing in the U.S. too. According to an article in Quartz citing recent data, the new American dream is to leave America. A recent survey said that 17% of Americans are planning to leave, and another 5% were already on their way, each looking for better quality of life. A poll revealed England is one of the leading choices, and it looks like England could need them. Canada, Italy, and Australia were also favorites. Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Mexico, Spain, and Portugal are also popular haunts for digital hustlers. So many young people leaving can lead to a brain drain. Governments might not like it, and they might start putting pressure on other countries or emphasizing the dangers and pitfalls of living abroad. But these are the effects of globalization. It's what hustling looks like when gainful employment at large companies is scarce. People will go where they're provided with the best life. But as the saying goes, the grass can look a lot greener somewhere else. Living without safety nets and constant insecurity isn't for everyone. That said, Western countries, especially the US and UK, are still hemorrhaging young people, and it's gonna get a lot worse. A report said in 2023 there were about 35 million digital nomads, with an estimated 18.1 million from the US. But by 2030, it's estimated there will be 60 million. If corporations had their own way, they'd employ as few people as possible. The end game is a billion-dollar firm with a board and some executives and a giant server farm of AI agents. Maximum productivity, minimal costs. That's the future. They don't need you, and they don't want you. So if companies don't need people anymore, where did all the jobs go? Your boss might be watching you right now, even if you work from home. The moment your laptop connects to a company network, you've basically invited management to pull up a chair in your home office and spy on you. And in the United States, it is virtually 100% legal. There's even a nickname for it, bossware. They know when you slack, they know about every message you send, and they can read them. Their eyes are always on you. It leaves you facing an uncomfortable truth. You're not just working remotely anymore, you're working under observation. Chapter 1. The Green Dot Illusion. If you're one of the roughly 320 million people who use Microsoft Teams since 2024, you're more than familiar with how it forces you to perform or risk losing your job. If your status light isn't green, your employers start to get suspicious about how long you've been away from your desk. There are even articles available that give you tips and tricks on avoiding the dreaded idle status. It's all part of something called productivity theater. At this point, it's become a whole industry unto itself, all to the end of keeping that little green Teams light on. It's why if you go to any online retailer, you'll find so many options for mouse jigglers, a desk gadget that keeps your mouse eternally shaking to avoid it ever going idle. But Microsoft has invented the ultimate curtain call for productivity theater: the unified audit log. Those 3 words might land you on the unemployment line. For management, one of the biggest advantages of Microsoft Teams and its unparalleled integration into the Microsoft 365 suite is the extremely powerful insights into your overall app interaction telemetry. That word is incredibly important to understand for all of this to make sense. IBM defines it as, quote, "the automated collection and transmission of data and measurements from distributed or remote sources to a central system for monitoring, analysis, and resource optimization." And that is exactly what the unified audit log makes possible. Your overall status and whether your mouse is moving is a worthless metric. Bosses will now be able to get a centralized data profile that tells them which apps on the 365 suite you've been interacting with and how often. They'll know if your camera is on in the meetings, what messages you're sending, and how you are spending company time. Thanks to Teams, they can now know at the click of a button, regardless of what color your little status light is. But that is not even half as sinister as the other thing that the tech allows your bosses to do: know exactly where you're working at any given time, like they've implanted a tracking chip right there in your laptop or phone. Chapter 2: The Office Spy. One of the latest features on Microsoft Teams will effectively allow your boss and all of your coworkers sharing the same work Wi-Fi network to stalk you. This isn't just a fear-mongering exaggeration, it's real. Microsoft has declined to comment in interviews, but the application will automatically detect your location whenever you connect to company Wi-Fi. This information will not only be easily accessible to server admins, but also your coworkers. One of the major so-called benefits of this new feature is that it allows you to detect and connect with your coworkers on projects. But anyone who wasn't born yesterday could tell you why that excuse doesn't stand up to scrutiny. If you want to co-work on a project with a fellow coworker, you can just send them a message. The only people who would benefit from knowing the exact location of all their workers at all times when connected to company Wi-Fi are your managers. They'll be able to see if you're a stack of potential profits or an unacceptable cost. Collecting reams of data on you is how they think they can tell the difference without actually getting involved. It's important to remember that the system admins at your workplace need to choose to turn this thing on. If they do, depending on your state, they legally only have to give you notice. But bear in mind, this isn't always so straightforward. They might hide this caveat in a larger user agreement, just expecting you to click "I agree" without reading. Or they might try to sell it to you through convenience, saying you'll never need to manually set your work location again. The only time you'll have power over this is before you sign away your right to privacy in the first place. Chapter 3: The Keystroke Trap. You might think, based on these 2 cases, that if your workplace doesn't use Microsoft Teams, you're in the clear. You'd be wrong. Technical employee surveillance is a thriving industry. With the advent of AI and the never-slowing-down software boom, new methods are being added to the spying toolkit every day. Take, for example, keystroke logging. This is somehow even more invasive and terrifying than the other options, and major tech companies like Meta are already doing it. As of late April 2026, Meta installed software on all employee devices that will track every key press as they type on their keyboards, every click they make, and even their mouse movements, all supposedly to train their AI models to perform these tasks autonomously. This dystopic technology is called the Model Capability Initiative, or MCI, and it is awful for employees for 2 different reasons. First, it is literally watching everything you click and type while at work and storing that information. If you use certain terminology that might be flagged inside the system, like pay raise or union in chats that you naively think are private, you might suddenly find the boss looking at you an awful lot closer. But even worse, if your company uses a program like this, it means that they're getting you to provide free on-the-job training to your own replacement. To you, it's the destruction of your livelihood and potentially even your industry. To management, they might reframe it as data-driven cost-cutting for the shareholders. Chapter 4: The AI Risk Score. It seems like nothing is sacred in the office, including your emails and browser history. If you're using a work computer, a work server, or even a work email address, all of these things are not your property. They belong to your employer, and that gives them sweeping rights to run through the content with a fine-toothed comb. Your company IT department knows every embarrassing question you've ever Googled on company time. Your boss can't just see the subject line of your email, its recipient, and the time it was sent, but also the body text and any attachments you had on it. None of this is off limits. None of it. Brian Kropp, Chief of Research for Gartner's HR practice, says anything that you write on any company messaging platform, your employer has access to, either through IT or HR. Anything you put on these platforms, your employer can look at. Demand for the technology has only improved the technology over time. Services like Sentry PC, Work Examiner, and iMonitorSoft all boast about one particular aspect of their functionality. If their system detects unacceptable employee behavior, and the parameters for this are, of course, selected by the employer, they'll secretly take a screenshot of the moment they view as a breach for the employer to keep as evidence. Imagine this: you're typing fast, and a perfectly innocent word that you were typing now reads as something offensive because you clicked the wrong key. This isn't just a misunderstanding anymore. If your typo is on a secret internal list of unacceptable words or phrases, the screenshot has already been taken and sent directly to your boss to incriminate you. If your boss has already been looking for an excuse to get rid of you for whatever reason, a piece of AI software has just given them the silver bullet and then painted a target on your forehead. And that is still not nearly as bad as the ways your bosses can invade your privacy if they have bought a subscription to Veriato Cerebral Security. It's one of the more high-end employee stalking software services on the market. They have taken the screenshot violation even further with their time capsule feature. It'll capture a continuous video recording of your screen if the software has reasons to believe that you are violating the company code of conduct. Thanks to AI integration, not only does Veriato and the hundreds if not thousands of companies like it use their recordings to gather massive data packets, it also creates profiles on every employee. Their profile will be the product of patterns that the software identifies when it's spying on you. How many files do you download and upload on a daily basis? How much time do you spend interacting with each workplace application? How do you message? How many messages do you send? The purpose of all of this is behavior analytics, allowing them to identify anomalies in your behavior. In other words, if you start acting outside of the pattern that the software has predicted for you, it'll flag you as behaving strangely and let your boss know that something is wrong. Just because a single workday meant that you downloaded more files than usual or sent more emails, suddenly you're under a microscope. We all know just how often AI makes mistakes or suffers from hallucinations, but does your manager know that? If they're buying one of these services, chances are they trust it. And if it randomly declares you the company problem child, it's your word against the service your boss is paying for. They even use all the data they collect to compile a risk score on every employee. It assesses the likelihood that you'll be a security threat to the company. And this is all true. Veriato's own marketing materials brag that it runs in stealth mode by default, meaning that users would have no way of even knowing they're being watched. It's like an invisible person standing behind you right now, staring over your shoulder. Even if it doesn't detect wrongdoing, it'll just take a screen cap of your device every 30 seconds. Chapter 5: The Digital Panopticon. Paranoia of being observed breeds obedience. This whole idea was created by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham in 1786, almost 200 years before John Wilder Tukey first used the word software in the context of computing. He called it the Panopticon, a thought experiment around a perfect prison where prisoners believed they could be watched at all times, and so they always behaved themselves. Now we're seeing Bentham's dream realized across the whole workforce as intricate nets of software web together to create a global digital panopticon with every employee at every company trapped inside. And in an effort to stay on top of it in a competitive bossware market, companies are creating increasingly bizarre and invasive services to set themselves apart. Sneak is a piece of software that likes to present itself as a conscientious mental health aid for employees who miss the workplace atmosphere. But is your mental health really improved by your boss having the ability to conference call you at any time without a decline button? ProtoScore is an AI service that relentlessly tracks your activity and uses it to create a numerical productivity score for your boss. And if you have a position that has a pretty nuanced view of productivity, then there is an excellent chance this one could get you into trouble. And software designed to track your so-called active work can genuinely eat into your paycheck, as workers like finance executive Carol Kramer found out. Her $200 an hour salary resulted in a truly pathetic take-home pay because her employers used tracking software to only let her bill for the specific minutes that she was actively working. And this isn't an isolated incident. 8 of the 10 largest private U.S. employers track the productivity metrics of individual workers, many in real time, according to an examination by the New York Times. Some services like FlexiSpy, Spyera, Clever Control, and iKey Monitor also provide call tapping functionality. Even more of these services offer webcam and mic surveillance, audio monitoring, and even mobile device access, so they can really get you anywhere. According to Surfshark, information on these services is even gathered into a centralized war room interface inside the software. The thing they're declaring war against is you ever having a sense of privacy again. But it's not just Microsoft. You are not safe on some of the most ubiquitous workplace apps on the market. If your workplace is using Slack and your company is buying the enterprise plan, it's easy for administrators to store and view your messages from everyone using the system underneath them. If the company you work at uses Google Workspace and subscribes to plans like Legacy G Suite Business, Google Workspace Business Plus, and Enterprise Standard, they can use the Vault. This ominously named feature allows them to archive and search specific content from the company's employees across Drive, Gmail, Groups, Chat, Voice, Classic Hangouts, and Meet. And the fact is, all of this is terrifying, and we have the stats to back it up. A study conducted by ExpressVPN found that 56% of employees feel stressed or anxious when they suspect monitoring is happening without their knowledge. Peter Holland, a professor of human resource management from Swinburne University, has gone on record saying that he thinks relentless productivity monitoring actually has the exact opposite of the intended effect. During an interview on the subject of bossware, he said, "The research indicates that the more you monitor and surveil people, the more likely it is that they are going to be less productive. People have spoken about being bullied. But despite this, market forces seem to be increasingly pressing management to take an aggressively data-driven approach to running their businesses. The result? They can no longer see the forest. In their desire to cut costs, they cut down all the trees." Chapter 6: The Office Revolution. The first line of defense will always be your own right to legally consent to this kind of spying. Check any work contracts you signed when you took the job for clauses that say you consent to workplace digital monitoring. It's a tactic employers rely on, using vague, carefully worded policies so you never fully realize how much of your privacy they're actually invading. But you can always check your computer by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Delete or Ctrl-Shift-Escape. You can open up your computer's task manager. This is essentially popping the hood to see what software is currently running. If you spot any of the apps we mentioned or others you don't recognize, you may have just found proof that your boss is quietly looking over your shoulder right now. If you're using a Windows device, you can also use the MS-DOS command line, which means pressing Windows plus R and then typing CMD into the search box. From there, you can search Task List and find the same information on all the programs currently running. Another option is analyzing network traffic for sudden spikes during work hours. However, this one is a little more imprecise. There could be multiple explanations for these spikes, and you're not going to have any certainty from just the data alone. If you thought that, you'd be falling for the exact same trick all these expensive software services are pulling on your boss. In order to prevent yourself from getting caught out by any bossware, it's also important to practice data hygiene. This means you should keep any work friends group chats off the official servers and on separate devices. A safe mantra to internalize is, never say or do anything on a work device or on a work network that you wouldn't be fine with your boss immediately being able to see. Sometimes the services your boss uses won't be as stealthy as some of the premium packages. Not everyone can afford to predict all their employees' risk factors after all. If your browser comes with a message that says "managed by your organization," then don't make any literally not safe for work searches. And treat it with healthy suspicion if your boss asks you to connect to a specific VPN while working, because it might be one that allows traffic inspection from the administrators. And of course, if you don't mind being a little more confrontational, you can always buy and download some reputable anti-spyware software. And even if your boss confronts you over it, at least you'll know that you still have the moral high ground. The workplace isn't the only place where tensions are rising. Companies might be watching employees more closely than ever. But the tech giants building those systems are starting to turn on each other too. And the biggest fracture might be happening inside the AI industry itself. When you buy a digital game, you assume you own it. But right now, sitting on a server in Montreal is a kill switch, a piece of code specifically designed to wipe a game you paid for like it never existed. No warning, no refund, just gone. The gaming industry told the European Union that stopping this switch is a technical impossibility that would cost millions. That's not just wrong, it's a lie. And a small group of rogue engineers just proved that you can save these games for almost nothing. So why won't the industry do it? Like every good mystery, this one starts with a murder. Chapter 1: The Execution of the Crew. Ubisoft revealed exactly how they feel about their players on March 31st, 2024. That was the day they flicked the kill switch on The Crew, an online-only competitive racing game that had been running for almost a decade. Just like that, it was gone. Millions of players were suddenly locked out with no way back in. The reason? Upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. It was typical vague corporate talk, and that might have held water if Ubisoft had just shut down the servers. They kept going. In April that same year, Ubisoft began revoking player licenses via their Ubisoft Connect service. They used digital rights management, or DRM, to prevent gamers from downloading or keeping any of the game files, sometimes without providing any kind of refund. For people who don't play as many online games, think of it like going to a restaurant and ordering a sandwich. You take a bite and you're halfway through enjoying it. When the chef walks out of the kitchen, he grabs the sandwich and eats it in front of you. And even more insane, this is somehow happening to everyone in the restaurant at the same time. But this is more than a company with a questionable history scamming their customers out of $60 to $80 a piece. It is an extremely dangerous precedent to set for the entire gaming industry. One fan on Reddit said, "This was the saddest and most ruthless decision I've ever seen in gaming history." Another called it abhorrent behavior that needs to stop being legal. And as Engadget put it, it's a reminder that we as consumers own nothing. We're living in a world where streaming services can just remove a beloved series because it's taking up too much attention away from their expensive new releases. Or a studio executive can snap his fingers and make a movie disappear for a tax write-off. Could a move like this push video games down the same slippery slope? This isn't internet paranoia. Earlier in 2024, Philippe Tremblay, the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft, said in a public statement, "We saw gamers are used to having and owning their games. That is the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game." After all, subscription services make a lot more money for companies than a one-off payment. If they decide they don't want you to play that game anymore or even have access to its files, well, that's a you problem. What are you going to do? Take it to the forums? Review bomb their Steam pages? It's not like they care. But this time, it was different. Ubisoft annihilating The Crew was the straw that broke the camel's back. This time, gamers were going to actually do something about it. Enter Ross Scott, a lifelong gamer and machinimator from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He spent most of his adult life being an outspoken champion of artistic preservation in gaming. In 2019, he called the concept of games as a service rather than a product fraud. And in the fallout of Ubisoft flicking the kill switch on The Crew, he was one of the most outspoken voices against it, describing it, quote, as an assault on both consumer rights and preservation of media. It makes sense that he'd be the one to start Stop Killing Games, a movement with a specific actionable goal in mind, to take this issue into the courts and push for real laws that stop video game publishers from destroying games and leaving customers behind in the name of pure profit. And if there was ever going to be the perfect inflection point, it would be The Crew. It largely functioned as a single-player experience that only had online functionality to preserve its always-on DRM. If the slide couldn't be stopped there, it couldn't be stopped at all. So the battleground for the future of gaming would be the European Parliament. It seemed that Stop Killing Games had a bulletproof case, with millions of signatures from online supporters and a real groundswell of momentum. But the gaming industry had an ace up its sleeve too. Chapter 2: Inside the EU Hearing. On April 16, 2026, Ross Scott and Moritz Katzner took the fight directly to an EU Parliament hearing where they had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to present their case. In just 2 years, it gathered up an unprecedented level of grassroots support from consumers who'd had enough of being treated like pay pigs by the gaming industry. As a European citizens initiative, it had already reached 1.25 million signatures by mid-2025. enough to fill the Roman Colosseum 25 times over. And despite some naysayers in the online community, there was no slowing it. And even though there was a barrier between the technical understanding of the campaigners and that of the EU legislators, it seemed like Ross and Moritz were successfully arguing their case. Consultant Daniel Ondrushka said, "Games that were developed 20 years ago still function. Games that were developed 3 years ago don't. It's a design decision. It's a business decision." In one sentence, Ondrushka cut to the core of the dark truth here. It's not about inherent limitations in running certain kinds of games. It's about the looming specter of planned obsolescence. Ross touched on the tiny portion of a game's budget that's designated for end-of-life planning, but that those numbers are often inaccurate due to factoring in features that aren't applicable to offline games. But while the Stop Killing Games movement has the human numbers to make lawmakers sit up and take notice, any fight against multi-million-dollar corporations is going to be an uphill battle. The question is, what kind of justification could they possibly give for their anti-consumer practices? The answer is a crafty one. Using an avalanche of technical justifications to overwhelm the conversation, not clarify it. If the language is complex enough, the lawmakers and the public might not be tech literate enough to understand it. The official statement of Video Games Europe read, in part, "Private servers are not always a viable alternative option for players as the protections to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content would not exist and would leave rights holders liable. Many titles are designed to be online only." In effect, these proposals would curtail developer choice by making these video games prohibitively expensive to create. There's a lot that's wrong with this, which we'll be able to thoroughly dissect with the secrets we've been able to dig up. But one part stands out as especially weak, because at the core of this issue is a simple idea. Games shouldn't be abandoned without an end-of-life plan to replace DRM online-only functionality. The danger here is that the knowledge imbalance would shake out in favor of the corporate lobbyists. Politicians are skittish and change-averse by nature. If companies can use the idea of an entanglement between the gaming industry and these toxic systems, they might just be able to pull the wool over their political eyes. Nobody wants to be the politician who signed off on an act that ended up collapsing a sector of the economy. That's exactly the fear that they wanted to instill in everyone's minds with this kind of rhetoric. If we want to see the truth hidden inside all the self-serving corporate spin, we need to look at the code inside the games. Chapter 3. The Anatomy of a Kill Switch. Switching off a game and its servers isn't like packing it up in a box and going home. It's more like trying to cut the right wires while defusing an active bomb. One wrong move and you could compromise a number of games that you still want to suck money out of. The average online live service game is running a little over 500 microservices and heartbeat pings. Ubisoft alone has data centers around the world with central servers based in Montreal. These carry every active release on Ubisoft's roster, and they're all linked. What does this mean? Simply put, that the kill switch is a lot more complicated for these companies than they'd ever let on, and a lot more expensive. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Untangling this dense web of microservers is the equivalent of knocking down the bottom 20 floors of a skyscraper while hoping that the top 40 remain standing. One wrong move could compromise multiple servers and put millions of dollars into jeopardy. So, why take the risk? Servers, especially with microtransactions, can still be profit-generating ventures. Shuttering a live service game and revoking all the licenses will alienate paying customers in the process. Is it worth it? Clearly, there are forces at work here that we don't understand. Motivations and incentives hidden behind the classic excuse, "It's just too expensive to keep a system like this running." Still, the Stop Killing Games movement isn't even asking the games industry to provide server support in perpetuity. One of Stop Killing Games' requests is that every live service game has an end-of-life plan. It means a game could be patched up to enjoy offline, or independent developers can have the tools to open their own servers. This is yet another thing that every company seems to have 1,000 excuses for. Adding functionality like this will fundamentally alter the development process, not to mention add millions to the cost of development. And we might be sympathetic to that if we didn't already have the ultimate evidence to the contrary. Chapter 4. The Velen Blueprint. All the arguments about it being impossible for major publishers like Ubisoft to release open-source tools start to fall apart the moment you look at what's already been done. Because a far smaller studio, Velen Studios, has already done it. and they won the hearts of gamers everywhere. When their beloved cult multiplayer Knockout City closed its servers in June 2023, players assumed that this would be yet another promising live service experience getting the sunset treatment. But this time things were going to be different. Very different. Rather than making the sunset event a quiet, solemn piece of small print, Velan decided to make the whole thing a huge blowout dedicated to thanking their fans. As part of their send-off, they even did a closing competition with a $25,000 prize. That in and of itself would be a pleasant gesture, but they were about to take it a step further and blow companies 10 times their size out of the water in the process. Before the game was sunsetted, they released it as a standalone Windows executable with private server support. That meant anyone with the know-how could make their own server for free forever. It's enough to give a high-level gaming executive a panic attack. Velan assigned a team of developers to modify the game into its privately hosted version. They removed licensed content, stripped out monetization systems, and reshaped it into something that could live independently. And according to reports, the cost was only around 0.5% of the game's total development budget. The whole process took 3 months, but in the process, it bought the game immortality. Velan Studios' director of marketing, Josh Harrison, thinks it was a worthy investment. He said, "It is the single biggest thing that we did to impact the positive reception of the sunset. It got great press, got great reactions from the players, and it ultimately keeps the game that everybody at the studio worked so hard on alive forever, even with the live servers offline." If an indie development studio could create a sunset patch like this, why can't a billion-dollar company like Ubisoft? When this question is posed, they rarely actually answer. Instead, they change tactics. Chapter 5. The Security Myth. One of the weaker arguments against the Stop Killing Games movement is the claim that releasing open-source patches for sunsetted games would open the door to massive security risks and give hackers a major advantage. One of the leading proponents for this is the controversial game developer and internet personality Jason Thor Hall, otherwise known as Pirate Software. While private servers built from the source code would inevitably have to deal with bad actors, using that as a justification to deny post-sunset patches altogether doesn't hold up. Given the consistent evolution of anti-cheating software between games, it's unlikely that hackers would be able to use it as a roadmap to interfere with games that have active server support. While keeping the code under wraps follows the security through obscurity doctrine, it's often been pointed out that this is actually more an illusion of security than any active measures toward it. The fact is, one of the biggest traps for game developers might just be something that they're embarrassed to even admit. Chapter 6. The Middleware Trap. There's an extremely important part of modern gaming development that we've been tiptoeing around here, and it might just be the key to cracking this whole thing open. Middleware. It's kind of like a bespoke, pre-made bridge between the gaming engine and some of the connected digital features. From animation to sound. Some programmers even compare middleware to a kind of software glue. Think Havok, WWise, Autodesk, and Nvidia, and this is no small part of the overall pie either. Middleware, licensed by all these external companies, can sometimes make up 15 to 20% of a live service game's codebase. It's where the utopian ideas of the Stop Killing Games movement begin to hit an immovable wall. When it comes to proprietary middleware embedded in the server-side code, not only do the developers not own it, they also don't have the legal right to redistribute it. It's the poisoned pill hiding inside live service code. That means, in the truest sense, not only do you not own the game, the people who sold it to you don't fully own it. These business-to-business contracts are choking out everything and crushing consumer purchasing rights in the process. This practice, inherent in the industry these days, is what's making the state of the live service industry so dire for gamers these days. But we should really ask, how bad is it? Chapter 7. The Survival Rate. As it currently stands, live service games are in a bubble caught mid-pop. 83% of the live service games that have launched since 2020 have shut down within 3 years. Stop Killing Games actually keeps a living record of dead games. As of April 2026, the current tally of games that can't be played in any way sits at 441. In 2026, Sony has severely scaled back its current live service plans thanks to poor returns. How severe? They actually canceled 8 of the 12 promised live service games they were slated to release by 2025. And it isn't just Sony. Across the industry, imploded games have made headlines and include The Cube Save Us, Highguard, Concord, and 2018's Radical Heights. What unites all of these? Despite budgets in the millions, none of them lasted more than 6 months. These games are in the middle of a legitimate existential crisis, a game apocalypse, which will leave years of work from thousands of developers essentially wiped out. Right now, the EU seems like it might be the last line of defense for a generation of digital media. But just how much is really at stake here? Chapter 8. The Final Patch. Right now, we're at a crossroads, not just for the future of gaming, but for digital media as a whole. Are we moving toward a world where paying for something actually means you own it for life, or one where buying is really just renting with extra steps? Because under the current model, every game, movie, or ebook or piece of software can come with a hidden string attached, and at any point that string can be pulled. We'll have a good idea which future we're going to be entering by mid-2026. According to a preliminary agenda published not long after the hearing, July 27th will be the day the Commission officially responds to the legislative proposal. The time between now and then is shaping up to be a real nail-biter, not just for gaming fans, but for digital rights advocates, media preservationists, and the companies trying to maximize their profits. The hearing was stronger than many expected, with Ross and the rest of the team articulating a good case for the moral principles behind the movement, but fate still very much hangs in the balance. If things go well for Stop Killing Games and for gamers in general, it's possible that the movement could help push a sunset standard provision into the upcoming Digital Fairness Act. This is a consumer rights bill designed specifically to protect people in the online space. Under that kind of framework, games released after a certain point wouldn't just launch and vanish into uncertainty. They'd be required to ship with a proper end-of-life plan. Even if server support did end, gamers would continue to own the games they bought in some form. And there's another side to this coin too. There have been some whispers in the Commission about making cuts to the DFA. The worry is that too much regulation would make them less economically competitive with their overseas counterparts. This is a pretty seductive ideology for large corporations, and it's actually responsible for a lot of the erosion of consumer rights stateside. If this philosophy wins out, all of the hard work of Stop Killing Games will come to very little. Ross has said he thinks he has a much better chance with the EU than with courts in the US. Which way will the pendulum swing? Only time will tell. The gaming industry is on fire. Thousands of jobs are being cut. $200 million projects are being scrapped. Behind closed doors, CEOs are panicking. But in a small office in Bellevue, 360 people are making more money than the entire workforce of Electronic Arts combined. They aren't just winning, they're changing the way we think modern companies are supposed to work. And if they're right, the entire gaming industry isn't just struggling, it's operating on a lie. Chapter 1. The Ghost in the Machine. In the first half of 2024, 11,000 jobs disappeared across the top 10 public gaming companies. Microsoft shut down Arcane Austin. Tango Gameworks was gone almost overnight. Embracer Group closed entire divisions around the world. Their restructuring dropped over 4,000 staff and shut 44 studios. Sony wasn't spared either. Internal restructuring hit its PlayStation ecosystem, with studios quietly shuttered or absorbed. Across the entire industry, the pattern was identical. It seemed like no one seemed immune, except for one private company in Washington state. Valve's headcount stayed locked between 330 and 360 people. There were no layoffs or hiring sprees, and there was no quarterly drama. The numbers back up Valve's status. Steam alone generated over $16 billion in revenue in 2025. The total business was projected to clear $17 billion. Divide that by their tiny workforce, and its per-employee figure is approaching $50 million. Microsoft, with its operating system, Cloud Empire, and Xbox combined, generates roughly $1.24 million per employee. Valve runs 40 times higher. Court documents from a 2021 antitrust suit revealed something even uglier for the rest of the industry. The average Valve worker took home almost $1.3 million annually. That figure dates back years. That number today is almost certainly larger, but this isn't just a story about compensation, and it isn't about luck either. Because when you look closely, the difference isn't performance, it's structure. Public gaming companies tied to investor expectations inflated their headcounts during the pandemic boom. They hired aggressively and then cut just as fast when the market turned. When things went south, they didn't just adjust, they bled people out in waves. Valve didn't follow that cycle. Their staffing level behaves like a hard ceiling, not a growth target. It's a structure that stays within its own limits. What does that say about the rest of the industry? The $200 billion gaming sector has been preaching scale for decades, bigger studios, teams, and budget. But this playbook may be the disease, not the cure. The early evidence comes from the only company refusing to play along. Chapter 2. The $0 Marketing Miracle. In modern AAA gaming, budgets don't just get big anymore, they get extreme. Sony's Concord became one of the clearest examples of that. Reports placed the development deal at over $200 million. Some estimates push that total closer to $400 million, and that doesn't even include marketing, studio acquisition costs, or the launch push. 8 years of development went into it. The studio behind it, Firewalk, was bought outright by Sony in April 2023. They bet big on Concord as their next big live service hit. The day Concord launched on Steam, 697 players showed up. The title sold almost 25,000 copies, and Sony pulled it off the shelves 14 days later and issued refunds to everyone who paid. Sony shut down Firewalk entirely 2 months after that. Years of work, hundreds of millions in capital, all wiped out in a matter of months. Around the same time, Valve added a project called Deadlock to Steam. It was invite only. There was no reveal trailer, no press tour or IGN exclusive. There was no marketing budget, period. Reviewers who tried to write about it were asked not to. Word spread through Discord servers. On September 2, 2024, Deadlock peaked at just over 171,000 concurrent players. Concord cost Sony roughly $287,000 per peak concurrent user. Deadlock cost Valve basically nothing. The pattern extends beyond those two titles. Helldivers 2 broke out in early 2024, almost entirely through word of mouth. It sold over 12 million copies in just 3 months. Most of the marketing was organic memes about a fictional planet called Malevelon Creek. Manor Lords, built largely by a single Polish developer, moved over 2 million copies in its first 3 weeks. The game had almost no advertising spend, just pure community momentum. So, does massive marketing spend actually push away the players that these games want? When Sony spent the GDP of a small island nation broadcasting Concord, what their target audience really heard was different. They heard, "This is corporate and it's trying very hard." Real interest doesn't grow out of billboards, it grows through excitement and word of mouth. Valve built their entire approach around exactly that idea. Access gets earned, not bought. It clearly works. Smaller studios have already started copying that format. The advertising-fueled launch playbook is dying. Something better has finally been proven to work. Chapter 3. The Output Anomaly. What's most unusual about Valve isn't what they ship, it's how cohesively everything operates. Take Counter-Strike 2. This wasn't just a sequel. It meant a full migration to the Source 2 engine, and a rebuilt lighting system, and a complete overhaul of netcode for the most played competitive shooter on the Earth. And then there's the hardware. The Steam Deck OLED wasn't just a refresh, it was a new revision of custom handheld hardware designed around Steam's ecosystem itself. Even their older work still behaves the same way over time. Half-Life Alyx remains the benchmark for modern VR years after release. Each piece feels separate at first glance, but together they don't behave like isolated projects. They behave like one system that never really stops. And it all runs on roughly 360 people, all while operating the largest digital store on PC and running several of the biggest live service games on the planet. Now compare that to the industry standard. At Microsoft, EA, or Activision, it's not unusual for a single AAA blockbuster to require larger teams than Valve's entire workforce. And even with those resources, those giant games still suffer from massive delays. How? The answer is simple. Valve keeps stacking advantages. Every project builds on something already in place. Counter-Strike 2 didn't need to build an audience. It inherited one, formed over 2 decades. Deadlock didn't need to solve payments or distribution. Steam already handled it. The Steam Deck didn't need to create a software ecosystem from scratch. Proton was already doing the heavy lifting. Nothing starts from zero, and because of that, Valve doesn't scale its team the way other companies do. It stays small by design. There's no boardroom bureaucracy, no focus group revisions or shareholder reviews. Smaller teams pulling in the same direction tend to beat massive ones more often than people think. And the opposite is worth paying attention to. When a company announces it's hiring thousands more developers, it can sound like momentum, but that doesn't always lead to faster shipping. Sometimes it's the opposite. In some cases, it can mean slower results further down the line. Chapter 4. The Shadow Hierarchy. There's a polished version of Valve that gets repeated in tech articles: the flat hierarchy, the rolling desks, the employee handbook that promises you can move to whatever project excites you the most. It's a great story, but it's a half-truth, at least to people who've worked there. Glassdoor reviews and ex-employee accounts describe something the brochure doesn't mention: cabals. Not in the conspiratorial sense, but there's long-tenured groups of senior engineers, designers, and economists. They quietly decide which project gets funded and which gets shelved, which new hires get integrated and which get iced out. One former employee compared the social dynamic to a high school cafeteria with budget authority. Another described being technically free to work on anything while being unable to get anyone to collaborate on the project they chose. Even without formal titles, there is still power inside the company. Pay can swing wildly based on peer perception. Coworkers evaluate each other, and bonuses or influence are determined by it. If someone can't read the unwritten rules of the room, they usually don't last long. The freedom is real, but so is the pressure surrounding it. For the people who fit in, Valve offers an unusual amount of autonomy and enormous pay. For the people who don't, the exit tends to happen quickly. A public company would never survive this culture. Compliance and HR teams would step in. There would be a raft of class actions. The intensity that makes Valve's team punch above its weight doesn't work inside public company rules. The system works, but not in the clean, idealistic way that the mythology suggests. There's a harder edge underneath it. Pretending otherwise ignores the people who actually had to live inside it. But the model proves something the rest of the industry has gotten lazy about. Hiring small teams of really good people who fit the culture beats hiring big just to hire big. Nobody is saying go copy the cabals. The real lesson is easier. Lowering your hiring bar to grow fast quietly damages the company. A company that stays small on purpose hires carefully. It protects what makes it work. That company may be doing more for its people than one that tripled its team to look good on LinkedIn, especially when half of them got laid off 2 years later. The setup favors the smaller, harder operation. Workers actually get paid more and output increases. Whether that works as a business is no longer up for debate. Chapter 5: The Passive Empire. But the real scale of Valve doesn't come from selling games. Steam takes a cut of every game sold on the platform, historically around 30%, scaling down for higher volume publishers. That alone is massive business, but it's only the surface layer. There are also marketplaces for in-game items, especially in Counter-Strike 2 and Dota 2. Players trade weapons, skins, charms, and cosmetics in volumes that start to resemble financial markets more than game economies. And Valve takes 15% of every transaction. The Counter-Strike case and skin economy alone made over $1 billion in 2023. The income arrives whether or not Valve releases new content. During peak periods, the marketplace alone is estimated to generate serious revenue, at times more than the entire annual earnings of mid-sized publishers. And none of it comes from releasing a new game. The strategic payoff is huge. Most game companies are stuck. Every quarter, they have to ship something new just to pay their bills. Valve doesn't. Its systems create something like a permanent cash floor, and that lets it experiment, kill or pause projects, and wait a decade if they want. They have no pressure to ship sequels. They can afford to wait until something is interesting. Compare that to a publisher burning hundreds of millions every quarter. Their boards demand progress across multiple live service projects at once. The difference isn't just scale, it is breathing room. So why hasn't Valve gone full Microsoft and bought every studio in sight? The restraint itself is part of the strategy. Acquisitions force you to merge cultures and expand headcount. They open up new legal risks and management problems that Valve has spent 30 years working to avoid. Public companies pushed by dividend demands or shareholders almost always deploy excess cash on something. Valve just lets the money pile up and sink it into something that appeals. Real independence means owning your own distribution, not renting it from someone else. So what does that mean for stuck studios in stores they don't own? The answer is not great. But the framing makes things much clearer for anyone trying to figure out where the real advantages actually are. Chapter 6: The 10-Year Gamble. Most people remember the Steam Deck launching in 2022 and being a hit. What gets lost is everything that came before it. The full version of SteamOS eventually launched alongside the original commercial Steam machines in late 2015. The standalone controllers only sold 500,000 units by mid-2016, and the actual console sold far worse than that. The whole project looked like a flop. A normal company would have killed it. Google launched Stadia in 2019 and buried it just 3.5 years later. Amazon's Crucible barely lasted 6 months. Valve didn't kill SteamOS, they kept it alive. They built Proton, software that lets Windows games run on Linux without the developer doing anything. They made parts of it open to everyone. They kept improving Linux in the background by contributing directly to it. Most importantly, they didn't rush it. For almost a decade, it looked like an expensive side project. Then, on February 25, 2022, the Steam Deck shipped. It didn't just sell, it created a whole new category. Suddenly, the decade of Linux work was the foundation of a hardware ecosystem, one that was chipping away at Microsoft's grip on PC gaming. The assumption that Windows is the only place serious games can survive started to crumble. Every one of those purchases pulled PC gaming further away from Microsoft's old revenue model. It worked so well that competitors began scrambling, trying to catch up to a future that Valve started building years earlier. Asus, Lenovo, MSI, and others have since developed their own Windows-based handhelds. You can't do this as a public company. Shareholders wouldn't want to entertain the idea of spending 10 years building an operating system. They would want to see numbers in the profit column. Valve doesn't have that problem. Gabe Newell reportedly owns over 50% of the company. That alone changes everything. There's no board pushing for a different direction. There's no pressure to show short-term wins at the expense of long-term work. Decisions don't have to look good in the next financial report. They just have to still make sense years down the line. Patient money, when it's actually used patiently, beats short-term money by a mile. It's not even a fair fight. Founder-controlled companies, dual-class shares, and staying private may be the only ways to make the long game work. People are now starting to take notice because most of those structures are emerging across tech now. The playbook is now clear enough to copy. Chapter 7. The Last Gatekeeper. Valve markets Steam as an open platform. Anyone with a developer account and $100 can publish a game. The store famously refuses to curate. Instead, the market should decide what succeeds. That stance has won them goodwill from indie developers for a generation. But it's not the whole story. Steam's recommendation algorithm quietly buries thousands of low-effort releases every year. The recommendation engine decides which games get shown to which users. Asset-flipped titles get buried. The AI-generated slop games that have flooded every major storefront also get buried. Valve now requires disclosure for AI-generated content, and any game that breaks the basic quality rules gets banned outright. So the idea that Steam is non-curated doesn't really hold up. It is curated, just not in the obvious way. That puts Valve in a tricky spot. They get a huge boost from being seen as the indie developer's friend, the platform that lets the market speak. But they also have to protect that platform, otherwise the store drowns in 50,000 annual releases of drag-and-drop junk. The two goals aren't fully compatible, so Valve does what public companies can't pull off. They make a quiet, practical compromise. They take the small hit of looking a bit hypocritical, and then they just move on. Are they protecting the ecosystem, or are they the gatekeeper who decides which developers get to eat? Both, probably. The platform's scale is what made the slop flood possible in the first place. Over 20,000 games hit Steam in 2025 alone. Valve also built systems that actively shape how that ranking works. It's not random, it's structured. The whole setup is messy, but it keeps Steam's discovery feeling intact. Games still feel like they can break through on their own, even as the store quietly filters, sorts, and surfaces what rises to the top. While newer storefronts struggle under the same explosion of content, Steam doesn't. It adapts. This type of moderation might be the only way platforms this size last without turning into heavy-handed publishers or becoming chaotic dumping grounds. Valve has shown a third, messier path. Sure, it doesn't quite match their own marketing, but it works. Chapter 8. The Pivot. None of this really makes sense in isolation. Valve ships more than its peers with a fraction of the staff. It does it without marketing, runs a culture that wouldn't survive public ownership, but still produces results that work. It's not a structure that's replicated in the big-name studios. Any of those looks impossible by itself, but that combination is something else entirely. It works because Valve has refused from day one to play the same game everyone else is playing. Just one founder, a handful of senior partners, and the freedom to ignore everyone's opinion on what a modern tech company should look like. Most coverage of Valve treats this as something quirky, but there's a clearer pattern underneath. A lot of what feels normal in big companies only exists because of outside money. Quarterly reporting, acquisitions, large staff numbers, heavy marketing expenditure. None of it is strictly required to make or distribute software. A small group of people building what they actually want to build with enough money to take their time. That's what makes it feel unusual. Why? Because everyone else has been so used to the status quo that they forgot that this one was even an option. Chapter 9. The Sovereign State. Valve isn't really a company in the standard sense. It behaves more like a small private state. Headquartered in Bellevue, it runs with its own internal rules that cover hiring, pay packages, and long-term strategies. There is nothing outside of the company that forces it to behave to the industry norm. And that's the key difference. Valve doesn't behave like a company trying to win inside of a market. It behaves like something that stepped out of the usual system entirely. And once you see it that way, the decisions that look unusual from the outside start to make more sense. Replicating Valve completely is almost impossible. Very few founders still own a majority of a profitable software giant. Very few cultures have been tuned this carefully over 20 years. Their advantage is specific. Owning the biggest PC game store on Earth is something only one company can do. But the rest? Companies can learn from it. Smaller studios watched the public market wreckage and they decided they wanted no part of it. Look at Local Thunk, the solo developer behind OBLITERATED. He turned down buyout offers and deliberately kept the operation small. Or Sven Vinke at Larian Studios, the team behind Baldur's Gate 3. He's run the studio for decades without taking it public. They recently shipped a generational hit on their own terms after walking away from publisher deals. None of these companies will become Valve. They don't need to. Each has picked up enough of the playbook to punch above their financial weight. Their combined success quietly proves the bigger is better idea is wrong. Gaming isn't finished. The industry layoffs aren't even over yet. The next wave is probably already in motion. AAA budgets are still blowing up past anything sustainable, and marketing departments are still pouring money into campaigns nobody asked for. The bleeding will go on. Some of the studios closing right now were doing really good work. The people losing their jobs deserved better than what their employers' money problems pushed on them. But somewhere in Bellevue, 360 people are proving a point. America sold China the most powerful AI chips on Earth for a cut of the profits. It's not a conspiracy, it's official policy. After years of promising to cripple China's AI industry, Washington reversed course and allowed Nvidia's chips for direct sale to Beijing. No espionage or cyber attacks, just a lobbyist and ink drying on a contract. With a flick of a pen, the most strategically important technology of the 21st century landed back in the hands of America's biggest rival. Because the AI Cold War was never really about stopping China, it was about who gets paid. Chapter 1. The Beijing Reversal. The press release that announced the H200 deal in December 2025 reads like ordinary trade paperwork at first glance. Read it again and something starts to feel different. Buried inside what is basically a one-page memo is one of the larger policy U-turns in American technology history, the kind of pivot that would normally roll out over months. Instead, it landed almost out of nowhere. The US government would now take a cut of every Nvidia H200 chip shipped across the Pacific, a quarter of every dollar. The H200 isn't something you'd find in a gaming PC. This is different. It's the kind of hardware built for one job: training advanced AI systems at scale. There is so much raw data passing through it that it behaves less like a chip and more like a small factory for intelligence. Stack a few thousand together and you get an industrial compute cluster that can train elite AI models in weeks rather than years. Under US export controls, that kind of system was never meant to end up in places like China. At least that was the rule. But before we go any further, imagine this. You're online every single day. You check your email, open a few apps, look things up, stream videos, maybe even do all of that while traveling. And to you, that feels totally normal. But behind the scenes, your internet provider, advertisers, network admins, and sometimes even governments can build a surprisingly detailed picture of what you're doing online. Now, to be clear, no VPN can protect you from everything. You still have to be smart online. Don't click suspicious links. Don't hand over personal information to sketchy emails. And definitely don't trust the so-called Prince of Nigeria. But a good VPN is an important layer of privacy, because privacy shouldn't be something you only think about after something goes wrong. It should be the default. And that's exactly what Proton VPN is built for. Proton VPN helps keep your browsing private wherever you are, whether you're at home, traveling, or just trying to stop your online activity from being tracked. Their no-logs policy has been verified by independent auditors, and Proton is backed by a foundation dedicated to privacy, transparency, and user rights. Proton VPN is also fully open source, meaning its code is publicly available for inspection. So instead of just asking you to trust them, Proton gives people a way to verify what they're doing. And privacy doesn't have to mean slow. Proton VPN offers high-speed connections with VPN Accelerator plus NetShield, which blocks malicious ads and trackers before they ruin your browsing experience. It also gives you more freedom online. You can connect through servers around the world, access content more securely while traveling, and use it for streaming, gaming, and P2P file sharing, all while keeping your online activity more private. So whether you're trying to stop advertisers from following you, keep your browsing private from your ISP, or just take back control of your online life, Proton VPN makes privacy simple. Click the link in the description or go to protonvpn.com/theinfographicshow to get up to a 70% discount when you sign up to Proton VPN's 2-year plan. Back in 2023, the Bureau of Industry and Security drew a hard line. They are the ones who decide what technology can cross which borders. The concern was simple. China's AI labs were making inroads in the AI arms race, and Washington was desperately trying to slow it. So officials started limiting how much computing power could legally be exported. The problem? The best chips were already way beyond those limits. So companies like Nvidia did what companies do. They adapted. They built a downgraded version designed to slip just under the rules, keeping the market open without crossing the line. But even that workaround didn't hold for long. Instead of a clean ban, Washington shifted to something more flexible, a 1-year waiver system with individual approvals. In practice, the government itself would decide case by case who in China was allowed to buy the advanced chips. The press called it the China Chip Review. The list of who qualified is the real story because the approved buyers weren't obscure startups or low-risk firms. They included Alibaba, ByteDance, and Tencent. There were also research institutions with links to the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, and state-backed cloud providers tied to China's defense infrastructure. The same organizations American policy had spent 2 administrations trying to starve of compute were suddenly eligible buyers. Once the hardware leaves, the rules and regulations don't leave with it, compute doesn't stay supervised, a data center doesn't announce what it's training. The United States was now collecting revenue from selling hardware it had publicly called a national security threat just years before. What's most telling is how the people who built the original blockade found out that it had changed. According to later reporting, many of them found out the same way the public did, through news agencies. Beijing didn't sit still either. Chinese regulators told state-linked firms to favor Huawei chips over American ones, but Alibaba, ByteDance, and Tencent moved fast on the H200s anyway, with reported orders running into the hundreds of thousands of units. So how did this move from unthinkable to operational without a single congressional vote? Just follow the money trail. Chapter 2. The Tithe. In August 2025, an agreement was already taking shape between Nvidia, AMD, and the executive branch. In exchange for export licenses, the chipmakers agreed to send 15% of their Chinese chip revenue back to the US government. This wasn't a tax or a tariff. It was something genuinely new in American trade history. A voluntary revenue share negotiated directly between private companies and the executive branch, all tied to approval for exports, access in exchange for a cut. For Nvidia, the numbers are staggering. Chinese revenue from the H200 alone is measured in tens of billions. The 15% share plus other commitments comes in at $12 billion. That is in the same range as the entire annual economies of places like Madagascar or the Bahamas. And none of it went through the usual political machinery. What this really created was a precedent. Export control stopped behaving like hard rules and started behaving like pricing terms, something you could adjust, negotiate, and trade against revenue. The December deal pushed it even further. With the more powerful chips, the surcharge reportedly climbed to 25%. The pricing model became obvious. Pay more, ship more sensitive hardware. The fine print added a 50% cap. Shipments to China can't exceed half of what's sold in the US. And the whole arrangement runs on a 1-year clock expiring in December 2026. After that, it gets renegotiated or rolled forward. But by then, the precedent will already be set. A government that funds itself partly from a corporation's exports has a financial interest in those exports continuing. And once that happens, the incentive structure shifts. Blockades stop acting like deterrents. They start behaving like checkpoints that collect revenue. What was sold to the public as smart policy looks, on a closer look, more like a protection racket. To pull this off, Nvidia needed more than slides and a corporate affairs team. It needed people who could rewrite the rules from inside of the building. And in 2025, it found them. Chapter 3. The Gatekeepers. Nvidia, for most of its corporate life, was almost an afterthought in Washington. In 2024, its federal lobbying filings totaled roughly $640,000. By the standards of a corporation with a market value north of $3 trillion, that figure was nothing. Pharmaceutical firms 1/10 its size routinely spent 10 times that. In 2025, something changed. Nvidia's lobbying spend climbed to $4.95 million, a jump of more than 600% in a single year. The main goal wasn't tax policy or antitrust, it was the Bureau of Industry and Security and the export rules that decided which Chinese addresses could receive American silicon. A key hire landed at Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, the Denver-based lobbying firm that had steadily embedded itself in Washington's corridors. They created a dedicated team for the Nvidia account led by Ed Royce. Royce is not a peripheral figure. He spent years as the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, one of the key places where U.S. policy on technology and rival states is shaped, which means he didn't just understand export controls on paper. He understood how they actually move, who writes the language before it becomes policy, which offices quietly steer the decisions, and where the real pressure points sit. It's the kind of experience that turns regulation into something you can work with, not just something you read. But companies hire former officials all the time. Lobbying numbers go up every year, so why is this any different? The answer comes down to timing. The Brownstein hire, the lobbying surge, and the policy shifts didn't unfold across a multi-year arc. It was a matter of months. Export categories that had been closed in May 2025 became unclear by August and then were basically open by December. There's a version of the story where that's a coincidence, but it doesn't read that way anymore because the record shows something too targeted to ignore: specific pressure on specific rules, the exact levers that ended up moving. What they delivered was something more valuable than meetings: a foothold inside the rooms where licensing exceptions were decided. Once Nvidia's policy team had that foothold, the next part of the machine did most of the work on its own. Chapter 4: The Corporate Loyalty Scorecard. According to Axios, a rating system exists within the West Wing, one that tracks corporate America. It covers 553 companies and trade associations, scored on how hard each one worked to support the administration's signature bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill. Companies are rated as strong, moderate, or low supporters. The factors include social media posts, press releases, ads, video testimonials, and attendance at White House events. Senior officials told reporters the document is evolving to cover other priorities. Those who score well are said to receive what staff describes as fast-track treatment. From everything visible on the outside, Nvidia's score is exceptional. Their separate $15 billion domestic commitment landed on the right side of every metric the system appears to track. The company announced data centers in politically meaningful states, gave executives plenty of face time at administration events, and tied their massive supply partnerships to the Stargate build-out. The connecting threads run through the Chief of Staff's office. Susie Wiles, who managed the 2024 campaign before taking the role, came to the White House after a long career in political consulting and lobbying work. That background has shaped how some inside the system describe the current setup: a West Wing where senior staff are closely familiar with how corporate and policy interests move through federal decision-making. For Nvidia, the advantage doesn't come from a single approval or decision, it builds in the background through how applications are categorized before they're even reviewed. Over time, that classification determines how smoothly requests move through the system. A competitor who shows up to the licensing window with a stronger technical case but a weaker scorecard rating does not lose because their argument is wrong, they lose because the scorecard has pre-sorted the queue. People familiar with the process describe it in simple terms: by the time you're debating the decision has often already been framed. Chapter 5: The Green Channel. Nvidia doesn't just lead the AI chip market, it dominates it. In the commercial sector, used for training and running advanced AI systems, Nvidia controls roughly 94% of the market. AMD holds 5% and Intel takes most of the rest. So when export approvals become case-by-case decisions, the system isn't really choosing between equal options. And that matters, because modern AI isn't just about hardware, it's about what the hardware runs on. Customer demand is overwhelmingly for Nvidia silicon. This is what the Chinese labs have built their software stacks around. Switching it out isn't just like swapping brands, it's closer to rebuilding your entire infrastructure while the system is still running. So even though on paper multiple suppliers exist, in practice the demand funnels toward one. Nvidia did not need a clear policy granting it preferred treatment. Its market dominance, combined with how deeply its software is embedded in the industry, meant that any export pathway for advanced chips would almost automatically route through it. So when a revenue share system was introduced, it didn't need to explicitly pick the winners. It just followed the path that the market had already carved. On paper, the arrangement looked neutral, something any supplier could in theory participate in. In practice, there was only one meaningful option, and everyone else was left outside watching the terms get set. The knock-on effect makes the structure feed itself. Each chip shipped pushes Nvidia's products further inside Chinese data centers and generates revenue. A percentage flows to the US Treasury, which strengthens the political case for continued shipments. But the rule book still officially rests on technical benchmarks written into law. So how exactly do you legally ship a chip that, by the explicit limits set in 2023, should be banned? Chapter 6: The Loophole Factory. This is where the system gets clever and where the technical details start to matter. Inside the Bureau of Industry and Security, rules don't only change through formal policy shifts. They also evolve through technical questions and guidance notes. These are documents written to explain how existing rules apply in practice. No hearings, no votes, just clarifications that shape how the rules work. It's where policy gets adjusted real time, without ever looking like it was changed at all, and over time those adjustments tend to move in one direction. As senior meetings between Nvidia and US officials take place, new guidance keeps refining what counts as acceptable under export limits. Each update on its own looks minor, but together they don't just interpret the rules, they move the boundary just enough for the chips to keep moving through. None of this is technically illegal. Most of it is the system working as intended. The US Department of Commerce has the authority to interpret its own export rules. That interpretation happens constantly through technical updates and guidance. The problem is what the combined effect of dozens of small clarifications looks like once you step back. Stacked together, they start to change what the rules actually are in practice. A fixed limit turns into a negotiated threshold. Technical specs that were meant to be objective limits start reflecting input from the very industry they govern. When a company can influence how the rules governing its own exports are interpreted, it's no longer just being regulated in the simple sense. It's helping shape the rule book it operates inside. The memory in Nvidia's H200 chip is more than just a memory spec. In frontier model training, it's the difference between a system that can hold a top-tier language model in active context and one that can't. It's also the line between a chatbot and a cyber warfare engine. By engineering chips right up to the very edge of the rules, Nvidia is now writing the working version of American export policy in real time. Chapter 7: The Shadow State Department. Jensen Huang's 2025 calendar reads like a study in parallel diplomacy. The Nvidia CEO held high-profile international meetings in Taiwan, Japan, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom. At each stop, he announced compute commitments and build-out deals at a scale that would historically have been worked out by trade representatives or cabinet secretaries. In several cases, the agreements the CEO announced set the agenda for the nation-to-nation conversations that followed, rather than the other way around. The Gulf compute deals are perhaps the clearest example. Saudi Arabia's announcement of a sovereign AI initiative anchored by Nvidia hardware set the terms of the American foreign policy meetings that followed with the kingdom. Nvidia built the policy and the State Department adapted to it. The same pattern played out in Abu Dhabi. The G42 partnerships and tied chip commitments came before, not after, the formal U.S. rulebook for AI cooperation with the UAE. It's not how foreign policy is supposed to work. The Department of State exists to coordinate how the United States approaches strategic technology and its transfer abroad. But now a company can announce commercial commitments first, and the government is left reacting afterward. They have to adjust their policy to match what's already in motion, and what emerges is an unusual kind of sovereignty. Nvidia is not a state in the traditional sense. It has no army and no treasury, but it does sit at the point where AI capability is actually determined through the chips that define what systems can and cannot do. And it has enough political access to ensure its commercial choices don't just operate inside the policy, they actively shape it. And that's a different relationship than regulation alone. It starts to look less like a company operating under rules and more like a company operating alongside the formation of those rules, not replacing the state, but in key areas setting the terms that the state then responds to. Chapter 8: The Reckoning. The first H200s under the new waiver are starting to land inside Chinese data centers, with reported orders already running into the hundreds of thousands of units. The training runs will follow. The models that come out will end up applied to use cases spanning the full range, from commercial chatbots to military targeting systems. The compute, once delivered, becomes whatever the operator chooses to do with it. What makes this hard to unwind is that it's no longer just policy, it's income. Once the revenue starts flowing into federal planning, it stops being a clean on-off switch. Federal budget projections included. Domestic build-out programs, partly funded by it, have constituencies that'll defend it. The bureaucratic machine of the US government has, in effect, taken a financial stake in continued exports of the very hardware it once labeled a controlled good. Reversing that deal would require not just a political decision, but the removal of revenue already locked into agency planning. When Nvidia raises its revenue projections, the government's projected share rises with them. It only strengthens the political case for expanding the waiver. The privatization of foreign policy stops being a metaphor and starts being a balance sheet relationship. Once a company has shown that exemptions to national security policy can be bought at a fixed price, the precedent becomes permanent. What's emerging here looks less like a one-off deal and more like a template for turning regulatory pressure into a negotiated cut of revenue. And other industries are already watching closely. Pharma, satellites, advanced biotech, sectors where the same product can be both commercial and strategic. For decades, the rule was simple: some technologies stay out of open markets. That rule hasn't been rewritten, it's just stopped being enforced in the same way. Nvidia is just one player in the AI race, and no one wants to be the one that slows down. But an arms race only works if it's sustainable. Right now, the spending starts to look less like growth and more like pressure building in the system. And when it breaks, everyone feels it. Everyone thinks Microsoft won the AI war, but they may have just lost it overnight. Because Sam Altman just made a $50 billion move with Amazon to stab Microsoft in the back. And almost no one noticed. On the surface, it looks like another massive AI deal, but hidden inside it is a shift that sidelines Microsoft and removes the one clause that actually kept control in check. And that changes everything. Because this isn't just about building powerful AI anymore, it's about who owns it, who controls it, and who's willing to burn billions to get there. By the time most people realize what just happened, the balance of power may already be gone. Chapter 1. The $50 billion Betrayal. To the public, OpenAI looks like one of the biggest success stories of the modern era, a Silicon Valley startup that turned into a household name almost overnight. It built tools used by millions, pushed AI further than anyone expected, and wrapped it all up in a mission to benefit humanity. That was the illusion. In reality, OpenAI is a mess that's bleeding cash. In 2024, its projected revenue was approximately $3.7 billion. Its losses? $5 billion. That's like buying a mid-sized airline and setting the whole thing on fire every 12 months just to keep the servers running. That's not a sustainable or successful business model. That's not a sign of a healthy, stable company, and it wasn't a one-time thing. It was a trend. In the first half of 2025, figures revealed that OpenAI was losing extraordinary amounts of money, generating around $4.3 billion in revenue while recording losses of up to $13 billion. Some estimates suggest the company's total losses could exceed $140 billion between 2024 and 2029 alone. But that is not that surprising. Training frontier AI models isn't cheap. Neither are the salaries of leading researchers and computer scientists, or the construction and operating costs of data centers. OpenAI is burning through money at breakneck speed. Its entire business model is founded on the idea of convincing investors that someday, somehow, all of this loss will be worth it. Microsoft bought into that idea. It poured billions into OpenAI and secured what seemed like an exclusive hold over the most valuable AI startup on the planet. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella even said that it wouldn't matter if OpenAI disappeared tomorrow. We have the data, IP rights, and the capability. Nadella thought that for all intents and purposes, he owned OpenAI. He was wrong. In February 2026, Sam Altman orchestrated an enormous $50 billion infrastructure deal with Amazon. In doing so, he effectively ended Microsoft's exclusive cloud rights. That wasn't supposed to happen. Microsoft was supposed to be the only serious player in the game. Microsoft Azure was meant to be the default home for OpenAI's technology. Amazon was the rival, the company that you compete against, not partner with. This wasn't a new vendor agreement or just some sort of multi-partner strategy. It was OpenAI blatantly betraying the tech giant that helped build it. The question is why? Why would Altman risk the wrath of Microsoft? Why jeopardize what seemed to be the most powerful relationship in the industry? Because the Amazon deal wasn't just about getting more servers or resources. It was a weapon built for one mission: to defeat a more powerful enemy, the United States government. Chapter 2: The FTC's Trap. For years, it looked like compute was going to be the biggest challenge OpenAI would ever face. But the funding from Microsoft introduced OpenAI to something else: antitrust. To observers and analysts, including those in government authorities, such as the Federal Trade Commission, this didn't look like one company simply supporting another. It looked like a merger. Naturally, Microsoft and OpenAI didn't label it that way, but the facts were clear to see. Microsoft had poured in billions and secured exclusive rights to its Azure ecosystem. OpenAI technology was also becoming increasingly integrated into Microsoft's most used systems and applications, from Windows to Copilot, Office, GitHub, and beyond. OpenAI, meanwhile, was looking less like an independent organization and more like a subsidiary, just with its own separate branding. The FTC noticed. So did other tech brands. Google even called on the government to investigate and break up the deal. Critics and regulators argued that Microsoft's massive investment and exclusive cloud control over OpenAI's technology gave the company too much influence. It hadn't just invested in an up-and-coming company, it had bought the future. So the FTC started investigating the two companies. If it could prove that they had effectively entered a de facto merger, or that Microsoft had acquired an unfair monopoly over the AI industry, it could force the pair to split. Microsoft would be able to survive that, OpenAI might not. It couldn't afford the risk, and it had to find some way to wriggle out of its predicament. Enter the Amazon deal. By pivoting to Amazon Web Services, or AWS, OpenAI gave itself a multi-billion-dollar legal shield. Because now, if the FTC's investigators question the company's allegiances or argue it's too friendly with Microsoft, OpenAI's lawyers can simply say, "How can we possibly be a subsidiary of Microsoft if we just signed a $50 billion contract with one of their biggest rivals?" It was the perfect piece of legal theater at just the right time. Because antitrust cases are built on dependency. Regulators are very wary of any company that appears to be entirely or exclusively dependent on another for its survival. But by inking an agreement with another tech giant, OpenAI proved its independence. Problem solved. Or at least that's how it seemed. In reality, there was much more to this story than meets the eye. Escaping the FTC was only a convenient and timely byproduct of a deeper and darker machination. The real reason OpenAI needed leverage over Microsoft was hidden inside a bizarre legal contract signed years before, a contract that contained a ticking time bomb. Chapter 3: The AGI Poison Pill. For years, OpenAI told the world that it is working toward AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Sometimes known as the God model, this is said to be the point at which AI effectively reaches and then surpasses human-level intelligence. According to the experts, AGI will be able to think, reason, and adapt just like a real person. It'll solve problems and switch from task to task rather than being pre-programmed with just one specific function or avenue of activity in mind. In effect, this was OpenAI's justification for everything. All the funding, all the hype, all the resources, it was all said to be in service of the AGI experiment. And for OpenAI, it was the perfect panacea. All they had to do was convince people to trust them, ignore the obvious problems, hand over their money, and then believe that someday they'd build something that would change the world. There was just one little problem. One buried deep in the contracts tying OpenAI and Microsoft. It was known as the AGI trigger. Basically, Microsoft was granted a seemingly perpetual license to OpenAI's intellectual property. But that perpetual license had a strict limit. As soon as OpenAI achieved artificial general intelligence, the new AGI model would be entirely excluded from the deal, and Microsoft would effectively lose its grip on the future of AI. At that stage, all commercial rights to the AGI would remain exclusively with OpenAI. It's a paradox, a snake eating its own tail. Microsoft was pouring billions into a company whose sole stated mission was build AGI. But as soon as that mission was achieved, Microsoft would lose all of its power and benefits. It was funding its own demise. But Microsoft's executives aren't idiots. They knew the terms of the deal when they signed it. They knew exactly how to work around them. All they had to do was ensure that OpenAI failed at its stated mission. They wanted the AI to be powerful, but never powerful enough to reach AGI. That's where things get complicated. Because AGI isn't a clear finish line, no one can agree what it actually means. So even if OpenAI pushed its systems further and further, Microsoft could always argue it still wasn't AGI. Sam Altman knew this. He knew that as long as the AGI trigger clause existed, Microsoft would never truly be an all-in partner. It would always have leverage, always have limits, always have a way to control OpenAI from the inside. So he had to change the play. With the $50 billion Amazon deal as its loaded gun, OpenAI forced Microsoft back to the table, not just to negotiate, but to completely rewrite the rules of the AI war. Chapter 4. The April 2026 Reset. In April 2026, the balance of power shifted. It wasn't a simple partnership update. OpenAI didn't want to iron out just a few issues or make a couple of amendments to its Microsoft deal. It wanted to demolish it and then rebuild it exactly as it saw fit. On the surface, the two companies saved face, announcing a simplified agreement and next phase for their partnership. But the terms of that agreement painted the real picture. Microsoft was still described as OpenAI's primary cloud partner, but the very next sentence added that OpenAI was now free to serve products across any other cloud provider it wanted. Azure's exclusivity was gone. Microsoft's once perpetual license to OpenAI's intellectual property was also amended and given a fixed end date of 2032. The tech giant no longer had privileged ownership of the future of AI. Revenue sharing was officially given a cap and a deadline of 2030 as well. Most importantly, the AGI trigger was gone. It wasn't redefined, clarified, or amended. It was deleted. That vague, hard-to-define clause that hung over OpenAI like a sword of Damocles for years was gone. It was replaced with something far simpler and far more controlled: a calendar with dates, deadlines, and caps. In other words, a standard corporate agreement. Microsoft's stake was also formalized at approximately 27% of the company. That is still a sizable amount, enough for Microsoft to hold some level of influence over the company's activities, but nowhere near enough for complete control. It looked like a big victory for OpenAI. The company had won its independence, decoupling its finances from the mythical AGI milestone. It was no longer a research lab trying to trigger a clause in a contract to win its freedom, but a corporation with a clear runway ahead. But there was a catch, a big one. To pull off this extraordinary corporate coup, Altman had to permanently destroy the very foundation that OpenAI was built upon: its non-profit structure. Chapter 5. The Death of the Non-Profit. OpenAI's non-profit nature was the one thing that separated it from every other Silicon Valley machine. This wasn't just another power to the benefit of humanity. A non-profit lab working with care and consideration towards something that was supposed to bring great benefits to all. This wasn't Google, it wasn't Meta, it wasn't worried about pleasing shareholders, because there were no shareholders. But that idealistic attitude couldn't last. Slowly and surely, the cracks in the mask began to appear. In late 2025, the facade was ripped away entirely. OpenAI shifted from a nonprofit to a public benefit corporation. At a glance, that still sounds like a righteous cause, a compromise between the original mission and a need to make money. PBCs are supposed to strike a balance between pursuing profit while remaining committed to creating a positive impact on society, the community, or the environment. In reality, PBCs still serve their investors almost as much as any other for-profit entity. Just as Altman would go on to smash and then rebuild his deal with Microsoft, he also destroyed what OpenAI once was, reconstructing it as something completely different. The groundwork was laid back in 2023. The organization's original nonprofit board, the one that briefly fired Altman, was removed and replaced by Silicon Valley insiders and former Treasury officials. The safety guardrails that had once been so critical to the organization's overall mission were dismantled. The systems that had kept OpenAI's progress in line with its focus on helping humanity were gone. In their place were product safety teams more concerned with ensuring that their AI doesn't say anything that might offend a big B2B client than actually harm real people. The cogs inside the OpenAI machine were replaced piece by piece until something fundamentally changed. What began as a research-driven system started to look like something else entirely, a profit engine, one that was preparing for a massive IPO, and was increasingly insulated from any meaningful ethical oversight. Behind closed doors, Altman and OpenAI's research leads had realized a terrifying technical truth. They weren't moving toward AGI as they originally expected. They were moving towards a brick wall. Chapter 6. The Scaling Wall. For years, the AI industry has relied on an unwavering belief in a premise known as scaling laws. If you add more data and more compute, your AI models will become exponentially smarter. It's all a question of resources. Provide more resources and you get a better product. All companies like OpenAI had to do was keep on building bigger and better data centers. They had to invest in more powerful chips and processors. Then they could sit back and watch as their AI followed the linear path to godlike intelligence. Sounds pretty straightforward, and the scaling laws worked for a while. Each new generation of AI technology felt like a big leap forward. GPT-2 was impressive. GPT-3, next level. GPT-4 exceeded expectations. So naturally, GPT-5, codenamed Orion, was expected to be a game changer, maybe even the final step toward AGI. Or not. Internal reports suggest that the scaling laws are stalling. Instead of providing some sort of quantum intelligence leap, GPT-5 has hit diminishing returns. It's still getting smaller, but at a slower rate than ever before. All of a sudden, this god model that seemed right around the corner is now a speck on the horizon. This isn't just a hurdle, it's a catastrophe. The scaling wall changes everything. It's no longer a situation where companies can just pour in money and watch their AI become twice as intelligent overnight. Now they're spending billions for only incremental improvements. And that is bad business. Because let's not forget about the burn rate. OpenAI is nowhere close to making a profit. It loses billions each year, but it was always able to justify that with the claim that AGI would eventually arrive and fix everything. The company's entire financial structure and investment incentives were reliant on that premise. That's why removing the AGI trigger clause from the Microsoft contract mattered so much. It wasn't just a legal trick, it was a quiet admission that AGI is a mirage. And if AGI is a mirage, OpenAI is just another software company and one that is failing to provide returns and plateauing fast. So how does a company like that justify a $5 billion burn rate to its next investors? It stops selling AGI and starts selling AI slop instead. Chapter 7. The SaaS Pivot. Selling AI slop. Meet the new OpenAI. It's no longer a valiant nonprofit pursuing civilization-changing superintelligence, but a sales force for AI business. It's slowly but surely pivoting away from its original mission and towards something much more mundane: enterprise software and corporate workflow automation. And it's happening right before our eyes. Rather than focusing its efforts exclusively on the next evolution of GPT technology, OpenAI is prioritizing alternative projects like agentic middleware and reasoning models like O1 or Strawberry. It's no longer charting a course toward human enlightenment, but making life easier for middle management. The focus has shifted to producing tools built for middle management, routing leads, generating marketing copy, handling support tickets. OpenAI hopes that this shift will bring in the money it needs to satisfy its investors. But there is a massive problem with that plan. The numbers don't add up. Traditional SaaS, or software as a service companies like Salesforce and Adobe, operate on incredible margins, often exceeding 70%. They make a product and they basically sell it forever, bringing in more and more profit with every new customer. That's why investors love SaaS. It is a gold mine. But OpenAI's attempts to enter this industry are not working, because advanced reasoning models cost so much more to run than conventional software. O1, for example, costs around $15 for 1 million input tokens. That might not sound like much at first glance, but in enterprise terms, it is a massive financial burden. Big businesses with hundreds or even thousands of employees can chew through millions upon millions of tokens in a single day. Suddenly, a smart assistant is not a cost-effective component of the tech stack, but a very expensive capital drain. Traditional SaaS doesn't work this way. Microsoft doesn't bill businesses every time they open a new spreadsheet on Excel. CRMs don't suddenly become twice as expensive just because employees clicked a few buttons and generated some reports. AI works differently. The more you use it, the more expensive it gets. OpenAI is desperately trying to force businesses to integrate overpriced, automated AI slop software into their corporate workflows to fix its own broken economics. It is trying to sell digital gold for the price of lead, hoping to convince people its money-guzzling AI agent isn't just really expensive software. But to make its margins work, it needs to dramatically decrease its own operating costs. It needs cheaper compute, which brings us back to the $50 billion Amazon Trojan horse. Chapter 8. Amazon's Trojan horse. The deal with Amazon wasn't about escaping the FTC's investigations or breaking free of Microsoft's shackles. It was about hardware. Part of the $50 billion commitment that Amazon made to OpenAI includes a multi-year agreement for the AI firm to use AWS's Trainium chips. Prior to this, OpenAI was a hostage to Nvidia. It was forced to use Nvidia's H100 GPUs. It's the hardware that everyone in the AI industry wants and needs, the chips that form the beating hearts of AI data centers. These GPUs have proven highly effective in training and improving AI. They are also expensive. Each one can cost tens of thousands of dollars, and that's before the added expense of building the rest of the server around it and actually running the whole thing. Large training clusters come with billion-dollar price tags. OpenAI has paid an H100 tax on every single prompt it processes for years, with incalculable amounts of money funneled away into the accounts of Nvidia and Microsoft. The Amazon deal gives OpenAI an off-ramp. Trainium chips aren't necessarily better than Nvidia's H100s, but they do have the potential to be much cheaper, up to 50% cheaper according to early estimates. They're also said to consume 40% less energy. By switching to Amazon's own custom silicon, OpenAI hopes it'll be able to make some significant reductions to the cost of its tokens. Cheaper tokens should make OpenAI's AI slop easier to digest for its big business customers. They might even give the company a slim chance of turning a profit before the 2030 revenue cap hits. In the name of saving humanity and building a tech utopia, OpenAI took a very different path, building software on proprietary Amazon chips, running inside Amazon data centers, selling AI agents to Fortune 500 companies. This is not what the company's founders envisioned all those years ago. This is not a beacon of open source enlightenment. It's just a cog in the AWS machine. So where do we go from here? Chapter 9: The Great AI Realignment. The hardware war is over. Unfortunately, humanity didn't win. Instead, the victors are the corporate behemoths that own the silicon. These companies with the money and power to do whatever they want and always get away with it. OpenAI sold the world a dream of godlike AI that would cure cancer, solve the climate crisis, and bring about a new world where everyone would be happier, freer, and more fulfilled. That utopian dream is dead, replaced by a dystopian corporate reality. Microsoft, Amazon, and OpenAI aren't laying the foundations for a more prosperous and creative age of human advancement. They're building their own locked down and ludicrously expensive B2B monopoly. The open marriage that now exists between those tech giants all but guarantees that the future of the internet will be flooded with corporate AI slop. Automated emails, synthetic reports, and agentic workflows that don't actually provide real benefits to real people. They just streamline the capitalist machine while eroding the value of human thought and creativity. Sam Altman didn't escape from Microsoft to bring about a better world. He broke free so that when the trillion-dollar IPO arrives, he and his shareholders will make as much money as possible. This is the grim reality of AI today. We're not getting AGI, we're not gonna see some digital god that solves the world's ills and makes us all happier and healthier. We're getting an inescapable automated corporate bureaucracy instead. And once you follow that logic all the way through, one question becomes unavoidable. What happens when the money stops making sense? Find out in $115 billion burn rate. The AI bubble just popped. Or watch this instead.